did not choose the title. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another installment of LPA Live. We are LP Alliance, an intercaucus coalition rebuilding and revolutionizing the Libertarian Party. My name is Amanda Griffiths. I am joined by Kyle Davis, I'm joined by you all, and we are both joined by Stephen Nekhaila, chair of the Libertarian National Committee. Thank you so much for being here with us, Stephen.
Thanks so much for having me on.
How are you doing this evening?
Good. Even better since I found out it was casual Saturday. And I cracked out, since it's such a special occasion, I cracked out the Jack Sinatra, which is great stuff. If you've never had it before, highly recommended. So thanks again for having me, and look forward to it.
Yeah.
I brought out my last bottle of Bicky 12 because I'm a Japanese whiskey kind of guy.
I have some Satori whiskey, I think it is.
Suntory is who
good
made
stuff.
Bicky. Oh yeah, it's good stuff.
And of course, it has another special occasion as well. It is May 3rd, which, as Stephen likely knows, it's Machiavelli's birthday. So
shit!
Machiavelli's 556th birthday. So yeah, we are.
I'll drink to that.
There we go. Cheers! Cheers. 556 today doesn't look good. A day over 57. So yeah, and I do want to ask. I'm curious because I also study Machiavelli, and you typically don't hear libertarians talking about being Machiavellians because the name gets a bad rap. What is it about Machiavelli that you see as being helpful to libertarian thought?
That's a really good question. First off, I would say that folks like Machiavelli are very interesting because he's been studied for 500 years. So, Amanda, just because I know you're a fan of Machiavelli, I showed you before we got on, but I've got a nice stack of books. This isn't the Discourses of the Prince, but these are books studying and analyzing Machiavelli. Of course, Robert Greene did a lot of studying Machiavelli on the 20th anniversary of the 48 Laws of Power. I've got the special edition. If you look at it one way, it shows Machiavelli. If you look at it one way, it shows Robert Greene. He's been a big influence in both good ways and bad, right? What's his name? Mussolini wrote his college dissertation on Machiavelli. Even some of Machiavelli's contemporaries thought he was this evil, terrible guy. But what I appreciate about Machiavelli is he's a realist. And I truly believe that through The Prince, I think he did two things. He wrote a manual for princes to rule effectively, but he also democratized the ideas behind power. Because for a long time, especially in Christian moralist Italy at the time, even though really, when you look behind the curtain, what the Pope was doing, the warrior Pope and what was going on in Europe at the time wasn't very moralistic. And Machiavelli looked at the world being an ambassador for Florence, and he realized, through studying and meeting people who were in power and working with these people, that, hey, these are the actual rules of power. These are the things that make good rulers. And it's not based on morals. It's not based on the traditional Western version of virtue. It's based on very hard, cold, unmoral or amoral views on, realities of power. And so I appreciate Machiavelli because he brings those things to light. And when he wrote The Prince, I think what he showed the average person, I don't think it was really appreciated until many years later, is that power isn't virtuous. It's not kind. It's actually quite the opposite. The powerful use virtue, use the ideas of, the seat of power, of the prince, of religion or whatever, to mask their intentions, which aren't always noble. And I think it was intentional. Machiavelli is a very interesting guy. When he wrote The Prince, I think he dedicated it to someone who worked under the Pope. He was originally going to dedicate it to one of the Medici family who he hated. But he says, don't trust flatterers, and then he flatters the person who's writing the book to. So there's all these contradictions. So when I joined the party, when I joined the LNC about 10 years ago, I started to really get into Robert Greene. I read the 48 Laws of Power that was recommended to me by a friend of mine. I got into the 50th Law by 50 Cent, which is another really good one, Laws of Human Nature, and of course, The Prince and everything else. And, it was a good primer being a young man getting into politics to say, okay, it's not necessarily a virtuous game. Doesn't mean you can't be a good person. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try to be a good person. I'm a Coptic Christian, Orthodox. I believe in, a higher purpose and a higher good and all those things. But, even being a good person has to be also straightened out with sort of, this is the way the world works, son. This is the way people are. And it doesn't make us bad people to understand that. I think it makes us intelligent people. And so when I want the Libertarian Party and libertarians to get about powers, I know I remember watching in an interview, who was it? It was just her birthday, our presidential candidate from 2020.
Jo Jorgensen?
Jo Jorgensen,
yes.
Yeah. So Jo Jorgensen was on the Patrick Bet David podcast. And somebody asked her on the podcast, if I want to get involved in politics, what should I do? And she said, well, I don't trust anybody who seeks power for them to basically get into politics because they're going to use it the wrong way. And I thought about that, and, it made me realize that there's a really fundamental issue with the way that libertarians think about power, because I used to think the same exact thing, just like JoJo, who I love and appreciate very much and hold in high esteem. But
to be on with us in July.
Really? Okay,
Well,
good.
yeah.
And I'm almost done with my rant here. G. Edward Griffin is the one who originally got me into the movement, or at least, the Creature from Jekyll Island, and then that got into a whole rabbit hole, and, of course, the beginning of the banking cartel and then how that relates to End the Fed and everything else. But G. Edward Griffin, he created what's called Freedom Force International. And the tagline for Freedom Force, and he wrote this long essay, and you can find it on Freedom Force International's website, talks about the need for freedom lovers to take control of the power centers of society, politics, media, business, etc. And he ends it with a Latin quote: "Impotentes defender libertatem non possunt." Those without power cannot defend freedom. And I've really taken that idea to heart, that the only way we can really defend freedom effectively is not just to be a book club, not just to be talk about philosophical stuff, which we should, we can do. That's totally cool. I've done it. We've all done it, and we're going to continue to do it. But to understand that as a political party, we need to gain power and be serious about, we must gain power and be in charge politically in order to defend freedom, because, we're the ones that are supposed to be different. And if we wield the ring of power, we can actually use it for good and use it to defend liberty instead of using it to expand the state and expand tyranny. So, it all kind of ties in together, but I think it's important for libertarians to study people like Robert Greene, people like Machiavelli, Balthazar Gracian, even, there's your Marcus Aurelius types, but, real politics study of power, I think, is necessary, especially if we're looking at a more asymmetric, dissonant political party. In order for us to gain power, we have to think asymmetrically. So anyway, that's my whole little rant.
No, that was good. And you had a few people in that stack too. You had Green, you had the Mansfield. You have a couple, though, right?
Yeah. Let's see. Harvey C. Mansfield is in there. Strauss. Let's see. I just read Maurizio Veroli's work on Niccolo Smile, which is very interesting. The Life of Machiavelli. I highly recommend this book, Machiavellians, Defenders of Freedom, because it goes directly into what I just talked about. Really, really interesting stuff. R.G.H. Sood, this is The Craft of Power. It's kind of one of the predecessors of Robert Greene, intellectually, so to speak. Very, very interesting.
I was interested that you mentioned Strauss, because he is, a lot of times he's regarded as this kind of neocon figure, right? Are you... And it's interesting to me. I went to Chicago. They're big on Straussianism there. Do you consider yourself more an adherent of Straussianism, or are you kind of like the method, or just his writing on Machiavelli in particular?
The writing's interesting. I mean, there's two schools of thought in Machiavelli. I feel like there's the more traditionalist view that, Machiavelli was this kind of bad guy, and he taught the elite how to lead and the powerful, and it was kind of like a Sun Tzu type, very groundbreaking, but also very destructive. And there's the more humanist view of Machiavelli, where, we look at Machiavelli as somebody who really loved Florence and really loved freedom and really cared about his, his home state of Florence and wanted to protect Florence and, used his works to try to educate and he has lived a very fascinating life, to say the least. And I tend to gravitate more towards the humanist point of view, where I see Machiavelli more as this kind of trying to remember the name of that Greek god that stole fire from the gods and brought it to Promethean. Yeah. He's sort of this Promethean type figure who, democratized power intellectually in a way. But of course, it could be used for evil as well. Mm-hmm. Somebody could read Machiavelli and, totally get the more traditionalist type view out of it. And it's sort of a Rorschach test, but it's one of the few, works, and maybe there's more than few, but it's one of those works where you could read it and you could go either way. And I kind of like that about Machiavelli and Robert Greene and so on, is you could read it and become a terrible person. But if you're already a terrible person, you probably don't need to read 48 Laws of Power, because you already know 48 Laws of Power.
Exactly.
So if you read it, you can defend yourself from people who are going to use it against you anyway. And that's more of the way that I view it.
Cutting in a little bit to, transitioning to Laws of Power and the like, and
sure.
how things have been on the LNC. So it's been an intense 90 days for you. And I can imagine a little bit harrowing, just getting into the swing of things and getting your feet wet. And of course, we didn't know this when we booked you, but there was a memo, as you are very much aware, that was mm-hmm. leaked. Kyle has a little bit more that he has to ask about that. But in general, if I can ask, and if you're able to share, whatever you are, how did you find out about this leak?
So I found out about the leak on X. I saw that somebody had somehow got a hold of it and posted a portion of it that I think was used in a political way to score political points. And even that person today said, "Oh, well, I'm not going to post the rest today because it's a slow, the algorithm's not good, or there's not going to be enough reach," which shows me this person's in it for the clout. They're clout chasing, which a lot of these people do. They just want to get clicks and views, and they don't really care about the organization. So somebody on the board, go ahead.
Cut in for a second. You're avoiding him, but I won't avoid him. I have no
okay. Go for it.
Mike Shaner's a dickhead from Alabama who's consistently like this. And so we've called him out before. We know that that's where a leak happened. We know that he's the one who's posting it around and he's trying to benefit from it. That's part of the reason that, LPA is working against specifically Mike Shaner in Alabama, because he's done this before. He does this for power. And at the end of the day, he can go fuck himself. So I said, tonight is a
well, I got a little bit left in the kind of bottle, so I'm sure if you want to ask me the same question again later, I might answer differently. So, it seems, and Shaner strikes me as the kind of guy who doesn't care about the Libertarian Party, who cares more about, I'm still thinking about a way to say this, but there's people who care more about the Libertarian movement more than Libertarian Party, which is fine, and it's probably where a lot of the rank and file find themselves. But when in positions of power, you need people who, in my opinion, are fanatical about the party and want to see the party succeed and believe in the cause and aren't just in it because, well, we're a part of this greater mission. And, if Trump wins and he's, 20% libertarian or whatever, we're moving things in the Overton window. It's like, okay, well, there's certain points I can understand, but by and large, I don't agree because, if we're trying to move the Libertarian Party forward, we need to grow and secure the health, wealth, and prosperity of the party, so to speak. It's a lot more difficult, and there's people that use the party as a vessel that they can just use when convenient and then discard when not convenient. And that mentality is, I don't think, healthy overall. But anyway, I digress.
No, we're with it.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I would cut in a second too, because I
Sure.
see a comment says the party is supposed to be part of a fanatical movement. I'm inclined to agree insofar as the party is an organ, right, of the liberty movement and what that means. is
Right.
that what you can't concede the party to an organ that is not part of the liberty movement, which would be, you know, either portion of the duopoly. That there is a broader cause, but because it is part of a broader cause, it's all the more important. It's all the more imperative that we maintain that cause within our actions and within the candidates that we support and the like.
Absolutely. And, you know, it doesn't mean to say, you know, I went out in defense of Thomas Massey when he was being dogged by Republicans in the GOP and Donald Trump. I think Rand Paul recently did something to piss off the GOP again. And that just shows that there can be success as a Republican who's a libertarian in the Republican Party, in the Republican sphere. I think Justin Amash is a great example. I think Massey is a fantastic example. Ron Paul is an example. Now, we could argue, what did Ron Paul accomplish in all of his career and tenure in Congress? He'll tell you. He's like, I didn't really accomplish that much. But he spoke up, and he gave people hope, and he showed that it is possible to be principled, although it's very, very lonely. And I think the point of the Libertarian Party is to gain ground and gain power in order for it to not be so lonely. If we get a bunch of principled people working towards freedom, you know, locally at first, and then hopefully down the road at a more state and national level, and we get a few wins in Congress and we build that momentum, it's a very, very hard, tough road to get there. But if we get there, the payoff is huge. It's high risk, high reward. And it's a very tedious project. And I think some people, they want to take the express route and say, well, you know, let's just kind of piggyback as a sort of Tea Party that's sort of, you know, joined at the hip with the Republicans in some way. And then, you know, they'll treat us nicely. And your local Republicans might treat you nicely. I know local Republicans. I know local Democrats that like me. Either I know it's, you know, at the local level, it's a little bit different, you know, because you get to meet people and they may or may not be good people, but you can make that decision. But once you get to higher levels, there's a real shift in the power structure. And to think that, you know, we're anywhere on the totem pole that's not the bottom is very, very naive, because when, you know, and I think Robert Greene, right. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, Robert Greene even says that when you have to be very careful allying yourself with the larger entity because they can eat you up. And I think that's, you know.
I think Susan's got a pretty good follow-up question here. Susan Hogarth, being the chair of the Libertarian Radical Caucus, she's a pretty well-known lady. Shaner is only one side of the leak, the least important part. Has the LNC leak been identified?
No, that hasn't. I don't know who leaked it. There's no way really of me knowing unless we made a motion to go through all the inboxes and see if somebody decided to be stupid enough to send it from their LP email, which they may or may not have. I don't think that's going to be popular enough to move forward on. So, you know, we can speculate, but, you know, at the end of the day, somebody leaked it, and either they leaked it to Shaner directly, or they leaked it to somebody who leaked it to Shaner, and they're now trying to use it to, you know, to throw shade. You know, and I'll tell you, look, so Debbie Mason of Strategist Inc., I met her. I'm on the board of the Key West Greater Chamber of Commerce, and she did one of our board goal settings about 2 years ago. So that's how I got to meet Debbie. Back last year, I talked to Angela McArdle about, you know, getting a board training. She said, yeah, let's do it. And we got Debbie to do our board training in August in Miami, which was fantastic. So when I came in as chair, I said, look, you know, I'm getting in there. I'm trying to figure things out. I need to know what's going on. I got to working with staff and, you know, seeing things from the inside. But I think we've been due for a comprehensive audit of operations for a long time. So we got everybody in a room. We fundraised $8,500. All the money that went towards Strategist Inc. came from, you know, basically hosing down LNC members, and LP California donated a big chunk, and you know, it was really cool. And Lars Mapstead as well. And I put in $1,000, and McKee put in $1,000. Everybody kind of pitched in. So Debbie got the opportunity to work closely with staff. She got to see the ins and outs, make suggestions, take a look at, you know, a cursory look at kind of overview of everything, and see if there's any opportunities to do better, or to, you know, wasting money, or what's the deal. So you know, she did, you know, she had a lot of good things to say about staff. I'll give you kind of a summary of the full report, I guess. Overall is that, you know, we have a great staff. We have great opportunity. America needs us more now than ever. We've already implemented a lot of the suggestions. The board for a long time, this is going back years, has lacked a unifying vision, and that essentially the chair, and this has already been leaked, the idea of a strong chair model is not something she recommends. She recommends that you go from one chair to the next chair, and you might have two different visions. So you have a lack of continuity in an overarching goal, and that and you can
has a policy team where we've got some ideas for bylaw changes to try to disperse some of that power too. So maybe we'll get in touch with you there to go further.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And, and I'll say that, and I typically agree. I mean, I think, I come in bearing certain experience and because I work on the business world and I've been doing this for a long time and I've been in the LP for a long time. So I come with certain attributes and certain skills that complement the position of chair. And, I talk to staff about retooling, we got to focus on membership. We had some meetings with the whole LNC to say, hey, what are our goals? Membership and fundraising is number one. That's where we need to focus on. Number two is maybe PDR, but that's going to take a back seat until we get the wheels back on straight. So we're already kind of working towards that. We have ideas, and I can talk about how we're actually going to implement those ideas here in a minute. But we are trying to move in that direction. And I think, to Debbie's point, when you have a chair that runs on a platform of, well, this is the direction of the Libertarian Party, where does that leave the LNC? If the board doesn't have buy-in, and if we're not all moving in the same direction, then you have 20 different people with 20 different ideas about what's best for the party, and that devolves into factionalism and everything else. So Debbie's recommendation is, look, you get a strong staff, you work closely with staff to make sure that you've come up with your goals. You ask staff, what resources do we need to get to those goals? And then staff does all the heavy lifting in order to actually achieve that goal. So it's taking a lot off the board and then putting a lot on staff, essentially moving the power more balanced towards staff and the LNC being the visionary. So anyway, that's essentially the report, along with a little bit of doomsdaying, as I put into my letter, basically being very firm that, we either get our shit together and we lead, or we die a slow death.
Yeah, a lot to touch on there.
Sure.
And yeah, in the first
really quick follow-up to.
Oh yeah.
Because there's donation question here. So if you buy from the LP shop, does the money go to the party or to a third party?
It goes to the party. I don't know our profit margin. I think it's like 20-30%, maybe more. We do get a drop shift, but yeah, we do get money from that. So if you do buy some merch, and please do. I had a designer. We have a new design for the Federal Reserve taxation is stepped or something like that. I had commissioned that. I think it's a cool shirt. Check it out. But yeah, it goes to the party.
Cool. What's up? Oh, yes. So to get back, because there was a lot that was mentioned there. In the first place, what is very important is that members have a say in that vision and in that policy. And I think the one thing that none of us want are people who are just kind of hired or appointed making those decisions right for us, rather than people that we elect. But to go back to the question of the leak and the leaker. So you had said that you don't think that a motion to go through people's emails would be very popular. I wouldn't think it was popular either. I wouldn't want people going through my emails. At the same time, if there's a leak and it compromises the integrity of the board, it does seem important to know, if you do end up finding out who did this, how do you plan to respond?
If I knew without reasonable or any doubt who leaked it, I'd probably ask for the removal. I'd probably ask them to step down privately, and if they didn't want to step down, I'd probably ask for them to be removed, because to leak something and make the board look bad, to satisfy friendships or for factional allegiance or whatever, I think it's wildly inappropriate. And I think when you become an LNC member, your allegiance number one is to the Libertarian National Committee. It's not to the Mises Caucus. It's not to the Classical Liberal Caucus. It's not to the Radicals. It's to the LNC. And some people don't get that. And, it's unfortunate, but it's where we're at. And it's the nature of being a political organization, I guess. It's very unfortunate because most organizations, most nonprofits don't have to deal with this, but we do.
Yeah.
So it's not completely surprising, but it is what it is.
How do you square, and at LP Alliance, you may or may not know, we have people who are still in the Mises Caucus who are with us in
Sure.
LP Alliance. It's not an anti-Mises group at all. So to kind of cue this question up in a completely non-judgmental way, just out of curiosity, do you still consider yourself part of the Mises Caucus, since you mentioned caucus affiliation?
At this point, I consider myself a GDI, a goddamn independent. I, for years, I've always had a good relationship with the Mises Caucus. I don't know if, believe it or not, I've had a good relationship with Michael Heiss for many years when he first started and got involved with the MC and created it. I think there was a lot of great momentum. I think the Mises Caucus brought in a lot of good talent. I think there's still a lot of good talent from the Mises Caucus side. I think the Mises Caucus does a lot of good work still. I'll give you a few anecdotes. So when I was chair in 2019 to 2023, I want to say. My daughter was born in 22, so 23. And the Mises Caucus came in around 2021 is when they really started to come in. And a lot of states were having issues with the takeover. They were having problems with people. Oh, they're coming in. They want to replace us. The Huns are at the gate kind of thing. And the Mises Caucus organizer for Florida was Celicia Slapter. She was a good friend of mine. She actually started in the LP Florida Keys. She lived in Key West. I know her very well. So a lot of new guys came in, and guys being guys, they kind of square you up. Why should I respect you? Who the fuck are you? So we had the old guard, we had the new guard, or the new folks coming in, and I talk with them, I work with them. There was a little bit of friction here and there, as there always is with new people, and even old people. But overall, we accomplished a lot. We had a great team. I can say the Florida guys, the Florida Mises Caucus guys, did a great job. I'm still friends with them. Great dudes, even the ones that are no longer involved in the party, and gals that are fantastic, that are still involved to this day. And so we didn't have the factional issues for whatever reason in Florida that a lot of other places had. We kind of meshed, we worked together. It wasn't like an MC versus non-MC thing. It was just who's willing to get work done. It was cool. Now, obviously, that wasn't the case everywhere. In some places, they were real piss and vinegar and gung-ho. And from the stories I hear, apparently, it was a little bit rough. And it could have been the fault of the old guard. It might not have been the Mises people's fault. In some cases, it might have been their fault. I don't know. So, I'm friends with many people in the Mises Caucus still. And there's probably a lot of people out there that may have liked me before that may not like me now. And there's probably some people that are kind of in the middle that are kind of waiting to see what happens. So I never really considered myself. I mean, there was a time I donated to the caucus. There was a time I was never really like super involved internally at all, ever. I'd go to their parties at convention. I knew the people. It seems like a lot of people from within the caucus. I know a lot of them that have left the caucus, are no longer in the caucus. There's a few people that are still very involved that believe in the mission. And, to be quite honest with you, from a philosophical perspective, when it comes to, a lot of young people that came in the party through Ron Paul that are econ nerds and value anti-war and everything else, ideologically, I probably align mostly with the Mises Caucus when it comes to policy. That's probably where my single issues are at. When it comes to internal party politics, in some areas we may agree, in some areas we're probably not going to agree, as you could probably imagine. So, we
definitely hosted a show during your election. So I saw it very firsthand.
So it's it's obvious, where are things at? If you were to poll everybody in the Mises Caucus and say, what do you think of Steve? I really don't know. To be quite honest, I'm not doing this to be liked. I think whoever's chair is going to get, they're going to get heat, and they're going to get a lot of hate, and it's a thankless job. And unless you're here because you're here for the cause, it's what are the reasons? What are the reason really is there to do it? I don't see a lot of positives. It's mostly labor of love. To answer your question, I don't really see myself affiliated with anybody but the LNC. When I became chair, I had a meeting with the CLC and I had a meeting with the Mises Caucus, and I asked them what do they want to achieve, and they gave me questions, and I gave them answers. And they may not have been happy with every answer, but I would like to have a good relationship with the majority of people who really want to put work into this party, and the people who are just in it for the clout and the politics and the money and everything else, they can go fuck themselves. So that's where I'm at.
For that, I'll take a drink.
Yes. On that, I know Kyle might have a follow-up, but I do as well. So since you said that you don't, you see yourself more as on the affiliated with the LNC than the Mises Caucus, although you still ascribe to the Mises Caucus ideology. So for me, I'm in the Radical Caucus, and
Dirty radicals.
I am. Well, you're a dirty classical liberal, so you can shush.
I'm in the Radical Caucus too.
Well, that was a campaign play, sir. But I'm in the Radical Caucus,
she knows.
and
She's on to me.
and so when I think about party governance and party leadership, that and my affiliation with the Radical Caucus is born of principle, and those are the same principles that inform how I think of the party and how I think of party leadership. I would imagine it's the same with the Mises Caucus, that you can't readily separate the reasons for which you align with the Mises Caucus from the approach that you take on the LNC. So are they really so separate, or does that still inform the way that you lead?
Could you reword that one more time? I think I understand what you're trying to say.
Sure. The fact that you're in the Mises Caucus for ideological reasons. Sure. I presume that's on principle, and those are probably the principles that you would use to lead as well. So sure. I'm wondering how you can really separate your affiliation with the Mises Caucus with your leadership when they're linked, right? They're informing your leadership style.
Well, I'd say that when it comes to messaging, when it comes to, maybe or the messaging is, or I'm trying to think what else. Because when you're chair of the LNC, a lot of it is operational. A lot of it is, what is the best thing for the board right now? What do we need to do, et cetera? How much of that is influenced by the Mises sort of ideology, or more of a Rothbardian Mises, like economically, whatever, literate, more single issue point of view? I don't necessarily know if that influences my politics. Maybe how I lead. Maybe it does, and I don't realize it. I'm a businessman by trade. We're a Wendy's franchise. We also have a Dairy Queen, Island Grill in Alamorada, movie theater. So, 14, 15, 16 businesses. We just opened up another location, Ocean Point in Key Largo. So I've got my hands full. And what I've learned, for my leadership often stems back to, in my opinion, how I run my businesses, how I manage my managers, my teams, deal with my DMs, deal with other people, handle situations. I also do stuff in the nonprofit world. I'm in the Chamber of Commerce. I also do stuff in emergency communications for the county, and lead teams there for emergency services. So it's like a lot of my, and I've also been chair of LPF. So I think a lot of my backgrounds in operations and leading people, more so than, and I would just say this personally, more so than I've been influenced by any kind of Misesian sort of, I don't think the music, I don't, maybe I'm not privy, maybe I'm blind to it, but I don't think it's influenced me too much in terms of how I conduct myself as a leader. Although maybe it does, and I just don't see it. So it's that possibility.
I was always anti-caucus until relatively recently, the last year or so. I actually posted a comment in the chat praising Amanda. I can't believe I've done this.
Checks in the mail.
Excellent. But one of the things, the Mises Caucus to me was always, originally, it changed for a while in the 2020 to 2022 era, and then it's kind of gone back to it, was a rallying point around Michael Heiss's ideology, which is very Hoppian and kind of the Republican side of Ron Paul. more than libertarian side of Ron Paul, which he's got, he's kind of on that line. He's a Liberty Republican. He's been with the Libertarians before. That's a whole different thing. And so I had seen personally Michael Heiss be just absolutely horrible to people online and everything else. And I was like, well, if that's the chair of this caucus, he's effectively the founder, the chair, etc. You can't have a tree with rotten roots, right? So as I watched people go into Mises, it was one of the, I assumed everyone else saw this the same way I did. So to me, it was very weird watching so many people join Mises, because it was like, are all these people just hateful assholes? Do they not see what he's done? And like you've mentioned here, that you've had a good experience with Michael Heiss, but I watched him run out Jen Moore from Pennsylvania. I watched him run people out of Pennsylvania all over the place. I watched him attack Whitney Bilyeu, both in Texas and when she was the interim chair there. And and this is not intended as an attack on you. It's I'm very much looking forward to the things we're going to get into later with Project Archimedes and their work together. But did you not see those things happening? Like how do you, were they minor? Were they just never in the Mises chats you saw? Like how did you not see, especially when they attacked Michigan and Rhode Island and Pennsylvania? So they were huge, and you were on the board for a while during those things. So I can't put it together in my head.
I was never in the Mises chats. I didn't use Discord, and I haven't been on X till recently. So I don't know if a lot of this stuff is on X. My experience with Heiss has always been over the phone, in person. And I mean, to me, he was always nice to me. He was always good to me. We talked a lot. Very philosophical guy. Strikes me as somebody who's a deep reader and a deep thinker, and he kind of has this sort of, he started from nothing, built this sort of movement. Now we could argue over, was the takeover rhetoric progressive or regressive? Was there an overall vision for the LNC when the takeover happened that X, Y, and Z? I don't think Heiss was a part of or involved as much as people like to think when it comes to the LNC the last few years, because he wasn't. Right. I mean, he'll tell you himself. He wasn't involved. He had other things to do. So
privately,
I think,
Angela McArdle will say the same thing.
Right.
But, after their internal fallout, but
and so I think the real question here is, maybe, at least for me, from an operations perspective, is what happens when you put people on a board who don't have board experience? What happens when you push people to join an organization when, the question, it's like that they asked if they could rather than they should kind of thing. And that doesn't mean to say there hasn't been great board members from the Mises side. There's been plenty of great board members from the Mises side. But a lot of them, if you look at 2022, a lot of people from the Mises side quit during that term. We had a lot of turnover. Some really good people quit too. And so, and what do people bring to the board? And this is something that is in the report from Strategist Inc. is that, we should be having we should be telling people, look, if you want to join the LNC, this is the time that needs to be put in. This is the money that you need to put in. These are things you can and cannot do when you join the board. You can't talk shit about the board if you're on the board, for example. And these are the skill sets that we'd like to see
publicly, right?
At least not publicly. Yeah. Right. If you say it, don't make the board, don't make the group look weak is one of my iron rules. Don't make us look bad. So, and that goes for anybody. I mean, and I think anybody who's seriously looking to run for chair, who's seriously looking to run for an at-large or a region rep spot should know it's not just about friendships or allegiances. There's real work that needs to be done. I mean, we're making less than $1 million a year as an LNC. My lowest volume Wendy's doesn't even have a drive-through, makes pretty much double the money as the LNC. So you're telling me that, as a concept, the Libertarian Party is less popular than a single unit, Wendy's. I think if we were really at our full potential, we should be making $30-50 million a year based on the idea of what we're trying to provide. And obviously you actually have to show proof that you're providing it. But, to get there, you have to have a competent team of adults who are willing to put in the work, who have relevant experience, who've, done the thing and are energized to go in. And it doesn't mean that you can't have new blood. Have new blood, have people come in and have them learn. But, maybe as an alternate, maybe people should be alternates before they run to become a rep. I don't know. Or serve in your state party before you run for a board position. All those different things matter.
As one more cut in here.
Sure.
I believe your link is lp.org/Stephen Donor. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
All right. I'll go ahead and fire that out to all of our listeners. Yep. We need to get money into the LP.
Yes.
As my plug that I've been doing on every one of our shows lately, if you believe the Libertarian Party has value, which I certainly do, we, are in a place where things are rough at the moment. We must get together. We must reach out, and we must pull everything back together. I know a lot of people watching this show said that they wouldn't donate. I'm sorry. I've been drinking a little bit, and so I'm starting to fall apart. They wouldn't donate until McCardle was gone, and they wouldn't donate until Heiss was gone. Both of those have happened. It is blatantly the case. If you don't throw at least $5 in and you've made those comments, you're a little bit of a hypocrite. So don't be a hypocrite. Go ahead and throw $5 at the LP.
You were talking, Stephen, about not talking shit about the board and in public, and I think we're all inclined to agree with that. We have several questions from people within LPA around this theme, and so I'm combining a few now here. Obviously, there have been tensions with respect to LP Colorado, with respect to other affiliates, and on the one hand, you have been very strong about, speaking out when people do things that reflect ill on the party. On the other, there have been other comments that you yourself have made. I believe that at one point you referred to Ben as, I think you jokingly called him a gay retard or something. You said that Toad dresses like an Hispanic middle schooler and uses the word faggot. And I again, Toad's obviously not part of the board. I'm wondering how you, again, square some of that. My sense is, of course, you're trying to be playful. You're trying to give people back what they gave to you. But again, comments like dresses like an Hispanic middle schooler, that sort of thing. Is there a slight discrepancy in some of the messaging about professionalism and then what we would acknowledge to be digs online?
Yeah. Well, I would say, first off, I'll start with LP Colorado and what happened there, and then we'll kind of work our way out, because I think that's a good starting off point. Actually, let me even go back further. LPF, when I was LPF chair, I always asked people to be cool with each other. If there was an issue, I would drag them together and be like, look, let's fucking hash this out right here and figure it out and get beyond this. And hopefully we would, and it would be cool. And that's a lot of times we'd nip it in the bud. When it came to social media, I gave my social media guy a lot of free reign. I mean, he would post some shit sometimes, and, I wouldn't necessarily run cover for him, but I would be like, hey man, roll this back or whatever. There was one point when he posted something with Kyle Rittenhouse, and just there was no need for it. It was not appropriate. It was just not good for the brand. Did it offend me personally? No, I don't care. But it was bad for my position as LPF chair, because I have to do something. And there's a saying in management: if you don't ignore it, if you ignore it, you bless it. If you don't address it, you bless it. So I had to fire him from his position. People were all upset about the post, whatever. Got rid of him, replaced him with someone else. And then, we went on from there. People forgot about it. I'll go back even further. When I was part of the LP Florida Keys, I was 19, 20 years old. I would post the most outrageous edgelord shit you'd ever see. If you go back on that page and go back to 2019, no, actually, take it back, 2014, you will see probably the worst stuff ever and a lot of it was from me. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I did the edgelord thing for a little while. And, look, I grew up with friends. We would talk shit. We would do all that. But then as I got older, I realized, look, if you're trying to run a professional organization, there has to be some gatekeeping. There has to be some moderation. And, people will hear that and freak out. When I first became LP chair, somebody retweeted Kanye West and something about the Jews. And let me tell you, the reason I went so hard against that guy is I just put out a scathing press release on Israel. So the last thing we need is like, Israel is doing this, and this, and the IDF is committing genocide, and here's Kanye on the Jews. It's like, it's not necessary. So I fired him, and I put something on Facebook, and people parroted it on X. It was like, yeah, we got a new position on social media, and people got really upset about that. Nekhaila is trying to censor and free speech and all this shit. And I think a lot of libertarians are allergic to the idea of accountability. They don't like being held accountable. Imagine that. They don't like the idea of, standards. Say it on your own personal account. I don't care. Say the most outrageous stuff. It's fine. I don't care. I'm not offended. Say whatever you want. But as soon as it's under LPIP, then it becomes my problem. And if it's my problem, then it's your problem. And so what happened with LP Colorado is somebody hit up LPCO on Facebook and basically said, hey, you guys are memeing like a bunch of 15-year-olds, to which apparently Hannah Goodman replied, oh, well, I don't give a fuck, and you're a faggot and a retard and a faggot and da-da-da-da-da-da. And so the guy emailed me and Hannah, LPCO, and so I'm CC'd on this email, and she's doubling down, tripling down, calling the guy more names. The guy's threatening to go to the media. She doesn't care. So to me, that shows me a couple different things. It shows me, number one, that she has the emotional regulation of a toddler, because she can't not reply to somebody who's obviously egging her on and responding in a terrible way. I mean, I train my managers that here's how you deal with somebody who's like instead of calling the cops, you handle it this way. Or, if there's somebody approaches you and they're all pissed off, there's a couple ways you can handle it, and we teach them and we train them, and you handle customers a certain way or whatever. So I'm looking at this from a customer service perspective. This guy's not a customer. Maybe he's just being an asshole. Maybe he's being a troll. But I'm CC'd in this email. She could see I'm CC'd in this email. So if that's the way you act in front of the chair of the Libertarian Party, how do you act when I'm not there or nobody's there to see? How much other people are experiencing the same thing, and when is this going to blow up? Right. So, some people ask, well, why do you handle it privately? Well, I was in that email thread. I don't think it would matter if I handled it privately. So, I put her on blast, and I didn't know this, but somebody shared it to LP's page. It is what it is, I guess. You got to put people in check sometimes. So that's what happened. Jeremy Kaufman, I think in the comments was like, I don't remember the exact comment. It was something about the words. And I said, look, it's not about the words. I was kind of being playful towards Ben, calling him a gay retard. I love Ben. He's a buddy of mine. But the idea isn't that it's about mean words and about censorship. It's how we use our words as an organization. And, there has to be some accountability. So some people are very pissed off about that. And, they think it's terrible that I would ever hold anybody accountable. If it was just like a volunteer from their Facebook page, I wouldn't have said anything. But the fact that it was the chair, I felt like I had to say something.
Right. And so, sorry, go.
I think that Dana Carver's got a pretty good follow-up here. And I watched Hannah's claim here, and I have my own opinions about Hannah that I could go into. But so you responded to Colorado, and so why would you respond to Hannah in Colorado and not LPNH? Because and Jeremy Kaufman's actually in our is one of our viewers at the moment. So if you want to address him directly, he is in fact here.
Sure. Yeah. So LPNH is interesting. They post a lot of shit I don't like, a lot of stuff that hurts the LNC, a lot of stuff that I think hurts donors. They also post sometimes they post really good shit too. It's like a mixed bag. It's like a 90-10 of really principled good stuff that I'm like, yeah, I agree. It's like, fuck.
So the 90 is the principled stuff? Or is it
the 90 is the principle? Well, I guess it's up to debate, right? I guess it's a little bit subjective. I'd say 90% principled, 10% maybe sometimes principled, but also could be a lot better. So I had a meeting with Ben and Jeremy with our Brian McWilliams is our guy. He's our PR guy, really great professional dude. And we said, look, we want to work with you guys. We obviously don't appreciate messaging that hurts us. And they said, cool, let's stay in communication. And, if you have something that you think hurts the brand, then let us know. So we've obviously been doing that, letting them know, hey, we don't like this, and, to be honest, there's only so much I can do, because I get at least once a day somebody saying, well, disaffiliate New Hampshire. What do you do about New Hampshire? It's like, look, I could go scream into the void on X all day. And I probably get a lot of reach and a lot of, a lot of people would like it and comment and requote and whatever, and it'll blow up into this big thing. There's people that really like New Hampshire and what they're doing, and there's people that really hate New Hampshire and what they're doing. And there's a strong dichotomy of both, which is, I think, what they're going for. And, if I had it my way, I'd probably, say, look, just keep out the controversial stuff. Don't talk about race and this and that and like stuff that's really could be bad for the party, and just focus on like really principled stuff, which they do really good at. At the end of the day, they're going to do what they're going to do. And I have very little control as chair of what I can do, what I can tell them. I don't have a big stick. I don't really have much of a carrot either. So I'm kind of in a position where I don't really have much control. We could disaffiliate New Hampshire tomorrow. They just had a convention. Guess what? They're probably going to come back and have the same exact affiliate, which would be hilarious for us, because they would do the same exact thing. So I don't think disaffiliation is ever the answer. I wouldn't disaffiliate Colorado. I wouldn't disaffiliate New Hampshire. If other people want to take that up, that's cool. They can try it. I'd rather be on good terms with New Hampshire in a way that I actually have influence and can be like, hey guys, can we try something a little different? And maybe that would work. People may not agree with that approach. I get it, but at the same time, what I will say about the New Hampshire guys, at least the ones I've met, is in person, they're all very nice. They're all very friendly. They're all very well read. I've had good experience with them every time. They're all like 6'5" for some reason. I don't know what's in the water in New Hampshire. I haven't had a bad experience in person. So, I mean, if they seem to me like people who, if you talk to them, maybe somehow maybe I'm wrong. I've tried, and I'll continue to try, but at the end of the day, I mean, there's really not a whole lot I can do.
You've tried talking. I'm sympathetic to the fact that they've been nice to you, and I also understand. We all understand you can't act unilaterally, nor should you, to disaffiliate New Hampshire. I don't think we think that should happen. It can be motioned. And I'm seeing a bunch of comments in the chat right now about it.
Oh boy!
The comments from both Facebook and YouTube are
they're all just
blowing up
at me.
It's just like a crescendo of disaffiliate New Hampshire.
It's not a disaffiliation.
Okay.
The first thing that I would ask, while I kind of try and aggregate the comments here, is would you would you back a motion for disaffiliation if it came to that today, hypothetically?
I don't think it would make a difference, because you could disaffiliate New Hampshire tomorrow. They'll just have a convention, elect the same people, and they're going to have the same. I would abstain, or I'd vote no at this point, because
that one's interesting to me. Because we saw in Massachusetts, and again, I promise that I'm not trying to go after you.
It's okay. I'm used to it.
We've been talking about Machiavelli. Yeah.
So in Massachusetts, we saw there are 4 parties in Massachusetts. I assume you're aware of the 4 libertarian parties in Massachusetts. I assume you're generally aware of the clusterfuck that is Massachusetts.
Yes.
And after the original Massachusetts Libertarian Party was disaffiliated because they were going over to the Liberal Party, we saw the former Mises Caucus become the party of Massachusetts. And that was partially because the LNC voted to recognize them as the affiliate, right? I don't remember for sure where like your vote was on that. I know that for a while there you were kind of voting with the same as like the big Mises thrust, so I assume that you probably voted that way. I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry. And if that assumption is wrong, please correct me. So
I don't remember.
It's
possible.
So like, what's the big difference there? And this is not a let's affiliate New Hampshire, because I tend to agree with Rachel and you and everybody else on the idea that Massachusetts or New Hampshire is only fixed if we take the time to grow the party there in the right way. But Massachusetts was disaffiliated, and a different group with different bylaws and different structure was affiliated as the new group, making it difficult, if not impossible, for the old group to take over. What would be different in New Hampshire's case there, I guess, is my thought.
Well, if it was going to happen that way, I guess that would be one way to handle it. I don't know. I mean, if there's enough interest in the board and people want to do it, then yeah, I guess by all means. Does that mean in a year that when the convention comes around, it'll be the same group as before that comes around and takes over? I mean, I think there's more people there that's probably what would happen. So, sure. I don't know. Is it worth a shot? It's up to people. It's up to people that aren't me to decide, that are on the board, if they want to try that. But
so you're saying you would abstain from that?
I would abstain. I don't like disaffiliations. I generally
agree with you.
When Joe Bishop Henchman went after New Hampshire, he tried to do the same thing, sort of. He sent a letter to the SOS saying, hey, we have this new group. He didn't do it the right way, and it caused all sort of problems. I mean, look, New Hampshire people are going to have to decide how to take their route. Doesn't mean I'm going to agree with it. And I'll probably come out, if New Hampshire says some more stuff again, I'll probably come out publicly and say, look, I don't agree with this. I think it's wrong. Blah, 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 blah. This is what the chair of the party thinks. And for what it's worth, this is what I think, because I don't agree. That's pretty much in my power to do, and lead the messaging of the national party. And, I generally believe that, most Americans probably agree with that middle ground of, I think I put a post on X at some point, like, hey, there's a difference between, gay race communism and sig heal racial segregation that most Americans live in or want to live in. And I'm not saying, there's really any of both sides in the party, but, if we can be that sort of principled middle ground, so to speak, like, look, we just want a better future for everybody. This is the messaging, whatever. And that's the messaging they'll take the national party. What state affiliates are going to do is what they're going to do. And, I'll try to do what I can in my power to try to sway them to be a few more degrees towards what I'm trying to accomplish. But, that's to be determined, I guess.
Although Machiavellian to Machiavellian, of course, we know Machiavelli says to flee always from the middle way. Flee altogether, pardon me, from the middle way.
Correct. Sometimes you got to take a side and.
Right.
So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it. I was looking at comments, but you can talk.
Well, I was gonna move on to a related, but not necessarily the same issue. So if it's about the same stuff, then
sure.
Go ahead.
So Rachel is going to give you a call this week about LP New Hampshire. She says in the comments. Justin says,
and that means Justin O'Donnell as well.
Okay.
Justin O'Donnell, if you think 90% is principled, you're missing 98% of the race baiting bullshit. A lot of similar things here. We were not going to go through all of it.
Well, I've only been on X recently, so right. Maybe I'm misinformed.
Right. Rachel says, "Meet with me, Justin, Nick Starwark." What comments skip? Meet with me, Justin, Nick Starwark.
I'm sorry.
Richard Manzo, or any of the people in the state who have actually done the work for the party and want to be a functional party. Rachel is against disaffiliation. And Joe Hanoush points out that they support Republicans against libertarians. Dana brings up a fair question, says that LPNH is very open. Hannah's comment was arguably, I might contest this, private. And so she's kind of wondering about why are we being harsh on Hannah and not as harsh on LPNH?
I did put out something kind of address towards LPNH. LPNH isn't going to change its way if I post something. I don't think. I think if I go after and it's not Ben posting it. I mean, Ben might be posting some stuff. I don't know. There's a difference between having sort of a strategy as an affiliate and saying, this is what shit we kind of want to post. I don't agree with it. I think a lot of it's in bad taste, and I think they would agree a lot of it's a mistake, or at least some of it's a mistake. By LPNH's own year-end report, they said, hey, maybe we shouldn't say certain things, or certain stuff that got us in trouble or whatever. Maybe we could roll back on that. One of the suggestions I had for LPNH is, like, if you're going to say something outrageous, maybe follow it up with an explanation so people can understand, oh, I got baited into it. Now I can understand why. I mean, maybe in the future I'll have to say some stuff about LPNH more directly. I don't know. There's sort of a Streisand effect there too. What I really didn't appreciate about LPCO is how they responded to a random stranger, an individual. LP Colorado puts out a lot of spicy stuff on social media too. I don't comment on or really care for. They put out a lot of memes and this and that, and they talk shit and, like, okay, whatever.
Sure.
The little bit of a difference between the two is, one is the behavior of the chair of an affiliate speaking on behalf of that affiliate towards a stranger, getting them in trouble with the media, and just generally acting in a way that I think is unbecoming of a leader of an organization. The other one is a concerted social media strategy that, can probably be taken in the same vein objectively, but is something that they want to do collectively. That's a little bit harder to address.
Sure.
I don't know if that's going to be satisfying answer for some, but that's
you'll never satisfy everybody, right? So it's
yeah.
I wanted to ask a couple questions about membership and
Sure.
Kind of the donation thing, if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let me do a.
Hold on, if we're going to talk about that, then.
Yeah.
Cheers, Stephen.
It's I'm already through my second glass.
Oh,
so
I just started number 3. I started with gin, so
it's
I'm pretending it's water to make myself feel better. It is very dry gin. It's lovely.
Yeah. So I'm going to present a thing, and I'm going to kind of give a setup here, and then we can kind of go from there. I say being too stupid to figure this out, apparently. Compatibility note. There we go. Got it. So this is an Excel chart. I'm going to hide us for the moment so that we can kind of all see it a little bit better. So this is a compilation of the membership of the LPA LP over time. I'm sorry, I'm so used to saying LPA. So from 1975 all the way to now. So we started out kind of 3,300. The first time we broke 10,000 was right here in 1995. 95 sees a gigantic jump all the way up the chart until a fall back down in 2007. So as a note there for anyone watching and why that's not a total reasonable thing to go by, we gave a lot of free memberships away in the 90s as a way to get people in and let people vote. So 2008, we really saw the Ron Paul revolution, and Bob Barr actually had some money, so he brought some people in. We've kind of floated in this area, right? We see in 2012, we had the spike. You can always see the spike toward the end of the year with the presidential years, followed by kind of a fall back off and a leveling. We fell back down, and then Gary Johnson's big run in 2016 happens. We fall back down. We see the level off. We see Joe's big run followed by a leveling off. And right here, between these 2 points, is where the RENA reset happened. We have the data here. I've drilled down more on this before for the people who've been watching. But it basically kind of flattens out at the beginning of the year, followed by a peak right before the RENA reset, and then kind of a drop back down. Since the RENA reset, we've seen pretty not good numbers.
RENA reaction, Kyle. It's the RENA reaction.
I'm sorry. Yes. it is true that a lot of the people who were leading Mises at the time were reactionaries and very much not revolutionaries. But so we see that in 2024 we finally have kind of a level off as the people are kind of getting excited for a presidential candidate. We see a slowing of the drop under Chase, and then and these are, as a note for everybody reading, this is a lagging indicator inherently. So this only goes through March the 1st, because that's the most recent donor numbers or the membership numbers that have come out. But you can already see between December and March that the fall has slowed. I've talked many times and done the deep dives on these, where I think that you becoming chair, Stephen, has actually stopped a lot of this fall. But Angela McArdle's talked many times about how she was so successful as the chair, and at least from a membership perspective, I think that it's pretty clear to anyone who can read a chart that that's laughably wrong. I mean, halving your membership in the course of 2.5 years is pretty bad. It's the fastest drop ever in LP history. So that membership, I'm going to go ahead and pull this chart back down unless you want a reference to it. The membership, wrong one. There we go. Sorry, guys. So that membership has been falling, and I think a lot of it is because of a deafness to members, a deafness to the people who were donating and everything else. I think that Angela really ran people away. I honestly do. It's nothing personal. I don't know her as a person, but I think that she was ineffective, and we can see it in the numbers as a chair. So have you been reaching back out to those people that have left? Have we been doing the data analysis there? How can we help? How can anything? It's we've got to get people back, and we've got to get the money flowing, right? Like that's the only way we survive.
It's imperative. I mean, we've 4 or 5 years ago, we had a bigger staff. We had a very well-paid fundraising director. We had, we were bringing in more money. We had better relationships with donors. Over the past several years, we've lost several major donors for various reasons. My understanding is that the getting rid of the bigotry plank was apparently one of them, for one of the donors at least. A lot of people were shooed away. And I can tell you something, speaking quite honestly, one of the big donors I brought in from Florida, he was a big donor, probably one of our top 3 or 4. He wanted to leave back in like 2021. 2021, 2020, around there. So even though staff was doing a great job 5 years ago, I can tell you that we did have some major board dysfunction even 5 years ago under JBH's term.
Sure.
And of course, there's different reasons.
I honestly think that we've never really recovered since Nick Sarwark stepped down. Which while Nick Sarwark's a friend, and I think that overall he did a good job there. I don't think that the crash was entirely JBH and Whitney, et cetera, fault there.
Right. There was a lot of factors that transpired over the last 5 years. I think one of the big things is there hasn't been an emphasis on fundraising membership. Number one,
very true.
We've had a lot of issues with our back of house tool set, tech wise, that we're getting through finally. And as we've made the full transition to Zoho, and I'll get into here in a second how we're planning on fixing this. But obviously over the last 4 years, you've had a lot of people discouraged from the Libertarian Party because they don't feel like they align with the overarching vision, or they don't feel like they're welcome, or they don't feel like, X, Y, and Z. There was a big jump in 2021. I saw it in Florida. It was one of our best attended conventions. A lot of young people. The Mises boost was definitely there. But, as we know, the major thing is retention. And even if the retention rate's 100%, people are still going to die. People are still going to go away. Nobody's retention rate's 100%. Ours is, probably around average. Whatever the average is, we're probably around there. I've heard it's around anywhere between 30 to 50%. It's probably a little bit lower than that, maybe, but even with good retention, you still need a prospect. You still need to grow. So right now, the goal is for me, I call it stop the bleed. It's like, I don't know if you were taking a stop the bleed class, but literally it's like triage. Okay, where's the bleed? You take a tourniquet, you throw it on, and then, you take them to the hospital and you bandage them up later kind of thing. So that's where we're at. So the tourniquet right now is, of course, being real about our situation and realizing, hey, if we want to survive as an organization, we can't be bleeding 10 grand a month or 30 grand a month or whatever, it ends up being at the end of the month, depending on how tight we tighten our belts. So we have a window of opportunity to really bring back members and have them open up their wallets to us again and believe in the mission and what we're trying to do here. So to that end, I've had a lot, and I made this clear at the last LNC meeting. I've been having a lot of conversation with Jim Babka. Paul Dar and I have been talking to Babka over the past month and a half or so. And Babka, he works for Roofer, of course, and Roofer has a couple of different organizations, and Babka's in charge of some. And so Babka's been kind enough to introduce me to a lot of folks who were part of the original Project Archimedes in the 90s and the 2000s that brought us really, up in membership at the time. And back then, we had a $3 million a year budget. We were breaking in about $100 per member. We had 30,000 members, I think, at one point, around 2,000, if I'm not mistaken. And, we had a lot of money. If we were growing at 10% a year, we'd be at, way more than we are now, $20, $30 million a year income if we were to grow at that pace. But of course, those projects kind of came and went. And also it depends on, the presidential candidate usually puts in $10 million or whatever, and that helps too. But also, I think the growing factionalism and divide and the schism in the party has hurt us a lot. It has, plain and simple. And so what we're looking at right now is we're talking to Perry Willis. He was one of the original copywriters at the time. He wrote the original copy and helped with a lot of the logistics of Project Archimedes. I'm actually in the process of working with Hannah to restructure our team a little bit. And we're basically
clarification. That's Hannah Kennedy, not Hannah.
Correct, Hannah Kennedy. Our excellent executive director.
Hannah Goodman, I would be out here campaigning hardcore.
Yeah, we just made her. She's our new fundraising director. She's just going to roast people for $5. People are lined up. Although a roast is always good. We actually used to have an LPF. Maybe we'll do it in LNC. Maybe we'll do it at the national convention. I would love that.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's actually been an LPA idea, is that we should have a series of things.
Kyle. That was the idea. My idea.
Yeah, but that already happens. We've talked about having like an LNC dunk tank or an LNC, several different things you'd like to see LNC members do. So I actually speak with Adrian Malagon, and I don't hate him. A lot of folks I know are upset with Adrian, which I understand. Adrian can be volatile, but
he's a smart guy. He could be an asshole, but he's a smart asshole. He's a great guy. I like Adrian.
So, I would love to see a dunk tank, and I think Adrian's cool enough to go with this. But have the LNC all lined up, and you pay $5 to dunk or to try to dunk whichever LNC member you're mad at for the day. So I think if we had the LNC rotate people through a dunk tank like at Grand Rapids, it would be. I think we could make some money.
I would participate. I think that'd be great. I think we did a pie one year, if I'm not mistaken. I think someone got pied in the face. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kyle, did you have a follow-up? I wanted to make sure that we got to that. You said that you had
a follow-up.
I don't know. You just said that you had a follow-up on the data.
So one of the things that we were asked about in LPA's Discord, which, inherently LPA is very wide. There's people that love you, and there are people that hate you.
That's not surprised.
I don't know if there's someone who hates him, but okay.
I think there's a few people that are very much not his fan.
There are people who not okay.
You're never going to win them all.
Yeah, I've tried to talk some people off the ledge on that one, but anyway, during the last LNC meeting, a comment was made that we've kind of been in a negative trajectory for like a decade or so, and I don't, this person pointed out that they don't think that's true. From the numbers we looked at, which I can pull them back up if it's easier for you. I think we had kind of leveled out at one of our highest leveled outs ever after Joe. And then the arena reset really led to just a tanking.
Not a dunk tanking.
Unfortunately. If every person that left gave us $5,000, we'd be very rich.
Yeah.
But so, you were with the MC at that time. You've been since excised as a cancer from the MC from some of their some of the MC Discord claims, but from people who are like Mike Shaner, who I don't care about his opinion because he's an asshole. Do you have any thoughts on your own like part of this, right? Because like you've been part of the LNC for a couple of years now. Are those votes and those things that you think about? Are they things that like you'd take back if you had the chance? Because like there was the vote for suing of Michigan, and those the three that I mentioned earlier with Rhode Island and Pennsylvania, et cetera. There's this kind of dropping in membership that happened because of Angela. There's a whole lot of things that have gone on here, and so I guess this is probably my final question on a retrospective thing. I think we've got some stuff we want to move forward with. In Michigan's case, there were the people who were trying to fight against Andrew Chatterton, right? Because Andrew Chatterton has really pushed, to put it politely, he has pushed the bounds of bylaws to make sure that he has been successful in the way that he wishes. Do you stand by those decisions? Do you think that those are kind of the right direction that you've gone? Now that I assume that you know more about the Michigan situation now than then. Is it, are you still there? And then, across like the kind of the three states that were kind of attacked there. I say attacked, I'm sorry. That's leading question. Do you like, did you not see it at the time that was happening? Do you still think that was the right decision?
Sure. I get where you're coming from. Here. I get where you're coming from. I mean, I've said it before. There's certain decisions during my tenure as an LNC member. There's decisions I've made lost sleep over, and it's probably not the decisions you would think. Usually, where it's affected other people I know, people I like, and I'm not necessarily talking about Michigan in this exact instance.
Feel free to give an example if it'll make it easier, like to explain.
There's been motions to censure that I didn't vote on that I think I should have voted a different way, let's say, or maybe things. Let me put it this way: there's motions where I feel like I should have taken more responsibility for the organization, and that I wish I did more of. And those are the motions that you kind of lose sleep over. And then there's other motions where years later you get more information. You say, oh, maybe I should have made a different decision at the time. And in the case of Michigan specifically, I mean, there's good and bad that came from that, because from that case we did make a precedent for other states protecting IP, which we've already used in different instances where it actually matters. I think it's appropriate. Now, going back to it, knowing more information, there's some things I wish I would have known then that I know now that might have influenced my decision in a big way. So, a lot of people look at my
for hours with Karen Ann on this. So, like, because Karen Ann is still very much of the mind that like this is the thing that protected the LNC. It was important.
Sure.
And it's like, but you enabled Chatterton, and she's like, I understand those things. So, like, I understand that this is, it's not an easy question, right?
Nothing's too black and white. But I'll tell you another thing too, because a lot of people only see 10% of what it is to be an LNC member. They see, oh, we have an LNC meeting and you voted this way and you voted with these people or the opposite or whatever. It's wishy-washy. What they don't see is all the committee work. What they don't see is all the private conversations and the private disagreements and the private battles, because there's been a lot from a lot of people that people don't see and they'll never see because they'll never be public. But I can tell you over the last, few years that, I've probably been a pain in the ass for a few people. And, I've had my disagreements in private, and I typically like to handle things in private, and people always judge me for what they can see in public. But, there's a reason that I've, been doing what I've been doing. And there's a reason that, I've done the things I've done. And, well, I can't exactly explain all those things. What I'll say is, being a board member, it's a lot more fluid than people think. Who people think, oh, this person's voting with lockstep with this person always goes with this person. I think real adults handle their shit privately where they can. And, I'll give credit where credit's due. A lot of the board typically does that. I always tell people too that, the biggest thing isn't the board meeting. It's between the board meetings. So when everybody's hanging out at the bar after an LNC meeting or in the hallways, that's where a lot of the action happens. That's politics. So a lot of things we don't see, a lot of things not on the list, a lot of things that aren't on X, those are the things that matter the most, and those are the things that are unseen. It's like the iceberg. You see the LNC list, you see X, you see everything, and then like 90% of it's underwater. So, people are going to judge me how they're going to judge me, and that's fine.
I think what people are curious about is why the decision was made with Michigan, why you made the decision that you did, and whether you stand by that decision.
Okay.
I think that, like, Angela's got a good way of wording it here. Angela TC is one of the Michigan 8, as it were, which is all we wanted was an election, and the LP used IP law to prevent that. I know people in Rhode Island kind of feel the same way, and so those are like, I think you voted for those things, those which are brutal, right? So if you could address those, like, we'd appreciate it a lot.
Sure. I voted the way I voted, given the information that was presented. Would I make a different decision today if I was in the same position? Yeah, I probably would. Do I stand by the LNC's decision to do what it did as chairman of the Libertarian National Committee? I do. But personally, as an LNC member, would I have voted differently? I would have voted differently. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
What has changed that's caused you to that you know now that you didn't have access to certain information then?
Yeah, I mean, I think more information on the case, more I think probably more information from our own counsel I probably would have delved deeper on that with our counsel. But actions have consequences either way. Sometimes you don't know what those are going to be, how those are going to, affect things, whatever. There's positives to a decision like that when it comes from a board perspective, but obviously it's going to cause issues in other areas. I don't know. If let me just say that without going into too much detail, that I think probably more information would have been nice to have.
It's
but no matter what, you're going to search it.
Sure. In my mind, that's kind of a lesson for the future, right? If a question to stop and say, hey, do we have all the information here? Can we, it's always a growing opportunity, right?
And maybe it would have still passed. I don't know. People voted the way they voted, and they might have been more confident than I was. So I can only speak for myself as one member. Was
it that the information wasn't available, or just that it wasn't accessible to you? Was there information that you didn't have access to for whatever reason and that you weren't able to look into?
Well, when you're making these decisions, a lot of time the information you get is what's presented during the meeting. So it's up to the board member, if they want more information, to go seek out that information. And I think it's the obligation of that board member to take that action as they see fit. Otherwise, you only have the information in front of you to work with. So lesson learned.
Right. And yeah, no, I appreciate that. We're kind of hammering you on it because again, it was like the major things like you have to ask about Michigan. So yeah, get that all out of the way.
And if you want to join the LPA Discord and see some of these things, feel free. It's but there's a lot of questions on Michigan and New Hampshire, and so we're trying to get you into a place where like you get the time to answer and you don't just get hammered of like, what the fuck? We gave you the information. Why did you put our way?
No. I do want to talk a little bit about the RFK deal and what went into that. That's still something that's rather polarizing. Some people stand behind it, some people don't. And I'm wondering where you fall and whether that's the kind of thing you would do again.
Yeah, that's a good question because originally I flip-flopped a few times on it because I was before it, then I was against it, then I was against it, then I was for it, then I was against it again. I felt that, on principle, it's not a good idea to work with somebody who's, running their own campaign. That's what I said, when it came around. Quite frankly, at this point, I think it's the best thing Angela's ever done because without that money, we wouldn't have an LNC. Does that mean I think it was the best idea in the world? Given the circumstances, if we didn't have it, we would not be here as an organization. Would I do it again? I hope we were in a position where we wouldn't have to do it again. We wouldn't have to do it because really what that did is it gave us enough cushion to we're now at a point where we can get out of the financial spiral and recoup and be in a much better financial footing because otherwise, we wouldn't have had the money to even exist as an organization right now. I mean, maybe if we sold the HQ earlier, maybe we'd have a little bit of money left and we probably could have secured it by. Maybe we could have done that. But, quite frankly, given the circumstances in a very pragmatic, objective way, I think, I'm glad we did it because, during that time when we had the KVF, we didn't address the underlying issue of we're bleeding membership. We're bleeding out. It's like those, you ever drive on the highway and it's like arrive alive, don't text and drive. Well, my unofficial theme for a convention is arrive alive. That's my goal. And I think we're going to get there if we do the right things in the right order and the right way. And I'm confident that we'll make it happen and we'll not only arrive alive, but we'll be net positive on our finances, which is where I hope we're going to end up. But it's a controversial thing. I get it. Clearly, we had our own candidate. We did the KVF thing. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about the optics of that and how that was perceived and everything else. But speaking from a purely pragmatic point of view, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the KVF. Now, the fact that we needed it in the first place is already a sin on its own. So we're like 2 sins deep already. I don't think 2 lefts make a right, but I think the lesson for the future is we need to get on secure financial footing where we're not looking for a Hail Mary to save our ass the next time, we're in this situation because, 2022 or 2024 was a very interesting election year. A lot of people think that, oh my God, Donald Trump came to our convention and he wants our vote. He wants our voters. People think that, oh, well, the party is so influential and everything else. It's like, well, we're winning in the sense of that, we've had good records over the last several years. So we've polled a good portion of the vote through the last several political, presidential campaigns. This was going to be a hard one regardless. 2024, when you have RFK, when you have Donald Trump, who's a very polarizing figure, especially this time around, taking a lot of libertarians with him, to be quite honest. And a lot of libertarians, some of them, they voted for us. Some of them voted for Trump or people on the ground. The Green Party had a big showing too because the Democrats didn't want Kamala Harris. And then, of course, you had RFK. So it was going to be a bad year regardless unless we were really able to make a lot of money and, make a big impact. But
to that end, to that end, do you see that deal as having compromised the integrity of our messaging? I mean, being pragmatic is really important, but, and I mean, there's not really, but, and that pragmatism needs to be for something, right? It needs to be for principle, for forwarding it. Do you think that there was any kind of diminution in our messaging or in its quality because of that deal?
I think it does. Yeah, of course. I think you're going to take a hit to some degree. People are going to look at that and say, well, you're basically, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I think a lot of the Maha people, the ones I've talked to, are somewhat aligned with our principles. I think a lot of them probably voted for Trump. I think a lot of them, are Bernie Sanders type people, because the Maha movement is very mixed with, sort of Bernie Sanders, Democrat types, and you have sort of like liberty people all kind of mixed into the same group. But aside from that, as a libertarian, as a rank and file member, if I were to look at this and say, what's going on? I think it's a symptom of long-standing dysfunction in the organization that got us to a point where, we're willing to sign on to something to make money because we really need it. Not saying it was a bad thing. And, I've worked with great people in the KVF to keep it going. But ultimately, the need for something like this for a certain amount of money, you are going to take an optical hit from people who aren't happy with that. That's just a political reality. Now, you can measure that and say, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? And make a determination on a good faith basis and say, well, maybe 60-40, it's good, bad. Maybe 40-60, it's good, bad. I don't think anybody on the board was ever like it's 100-0. Maybe there's a few. There might be a few. Actually, I'll take that back. But I think most people are like it's a 60-40, 40-60 kind of thing. And I think most people that would look at it objectively would probably agree. There's probably some, maybe to varying degrees. But, ultimately it's a symptom of a problem. And the problem is that we're not on good financial footing. And until we get on good financial footing, we're going to run, I don't know if we'd ever have this opportunity again, but, I think, I voted against it, but at this point, I'm glad we did it. Because if we didn't, we wouldn't exist. And it gives us an opportunity to fix the underlying issue once again and say, okay, well, we did the thing. Some people aren't happy about it, but, we have a window now, a small window, to turn the ship around, get members back on board, get all these lapsed members back in the party, reinvigorated, re-energized, because things are not changing. Just because Donald Trump's president doesn't mean that the federal government stopped being tyrannical. Doesn't mean we're not heading towards World War III. Doesn't mean we're not heading towards a recession or a depression. Doesn't mean things aren't going to get worse. So there's still a market for libertarianism. And as things go on, I really do believe that a lot of the MAGA people are going to be disaffected, especially the ones that are really principled. And they're going to say, okay, maybe I'm willing to give a few bucks to the Libertarian Party because principally that's where I'm at. And then for everybody else, on the left or the right, or true libertarians that are just libertarian, we need to earn those people back. So it's about earning our people back, showing them they have a political home in our movement, reaching out to those people, doing a little bit of prospecting, a little bit of, search and rescue, and, convincing our big donors this is what we're doing, providing value as an organization through PDR and everything else, and convincing people that what we're doing is, we're here to work as a professional organization and keep it that way. And I'm hoping 5 years from now or 2 years from now or whatever, we don't need a KVF. We don't need to, we need to be able to stand on our own 2 feet as an organization. And long term, if I could snap my fingers and have an ideal libertarian party, it's a party that's making millions and millions of dollars, that has the staff necessary to carry out the vision of the board, for PDR, for Defend the Guard, for whatever. And to be able to fund these programs and show results that donors appreciate, have pockets of libertarianism in different communities and places around the country as libertarians, as a big L, or nonpartisan even is fine too, but to show that what we're doing works, and to get people to donate towards that and to grow our influence and to grow our presence and to become more of a danger to the old 2 parties. I think there's a real opportunity within the next 5 to 10 years to actually take out the Democratic Party, because they've lost their way. Yeah. They've lost even their rank and file don't trust them. It's an amazing opportunity.
We're in such a wild space right now. Like the Democrats and Republicans are kind of in a huge flux, right? Like, there's always internal conflict, and right now the Republicans are the old guard, which are dead. You know, they're mostly literally. Most of them are in fact 70+ years old and are literally dying. And then there's MAGA. And so in the Republicans, we've got this big opportunity to pull a whole bunch of them toward libertarianism. And the Democrats have no idea what's going on. The only faction that's even trying to exist are the progressives. And I think that every libertarian here knows the problems with people like AOC. And so, like, there's literally like 87% of the country that we can start pulling on right now. And those people, you know, despite Trump's tariffs and everything, have at least, you know, $5 to give to the LP, which I'm going to replug a donate link right now.
And so this is the thing, too, when we talk about taking out the Democratic Party, what's interesting is that, so the Republican Party on paper is doing fantastic. Trump is in the White House. They've got Republican leadership. MAGA is strong. It's a populist movement. They're fine as far as they're concerned. When it comes to the Democrats, they're fragmented. They are fractured. One of the great oversights, and you're welcome to disagree, one of the great oversights, in my opinion, that the LP committed was in not seeing the strength, the ideological uniformity of the Republican Party and courting the Republicans when they already had a good thing going, still have a good thing going as far as they're concerned on paper. And it's the Democrats who are feeling lost and disaffected. Do you see more of an opportunity with one or the other? Is it the sort of, go for it.
No, it's a good question. I think there's an opportunity to show disaffected MAGA people or Republicans that, hey, look, you voted for Trump for these reasons, but, you know, is he actually what you think he is? Is he just a populist, or is he really principled? Because if there is a principled Republican or MAGA or independent or whatever that voted for Trump, you know, we can make a really good case that, you know, we're more America first than Trump is. You know, there's a lot more in common with the Libertarian Party, and like you can, you know, rank and file members or whoever, they can vote for whoever, still support the LP financially and with their vote. But I think as the time goes by, I think you're probably going to see over the next, you know, few years more disaffected Democrats. The House Minority Leader in Florida, he was a Democrat. He just stepped down. He said the Democratic Party is dead in Florida. They've lost their way. They let the fringes take over. They don't have a unifying message, and they've lost support. So I do think there's a good search and rescue mission to be had on the so-called left, to find real libertarians who agree with us on different issues. And, you know, I always believe that if you find somebody, whether they're left or right originally, I mean, Jeremy Kauffman came from the left, you know, I mean, Jesus Christ. But there's a lot of people that I've met from the left that have turned out to be really solid, like middle of the road libertarians who are like, I read Mises and I, you know, read Hazlitt and, you know, this and that, and whatever else. And they become really hardcore libertarian members. It doesn't really necessarily matter where they come from. Right. You know, when they find us, then they kind of become radicalized and they become more libertarian. They become more ideological. It's kind of like a religious conversion. You find somebody, you bring them in, and over time they become more and more, you know, they kind of get it. So I think we have a big opportunity to bring the left in. I think a big mistake would be to say, well, we don't want people from the left to come in, or we don't want people from the right to come in, you know, the traditional left and right. I think we need to be open to all sides. If you agree with 70, 80% of our platform, you should be a part of the party. And I guarantee you over time, people tend to become more radical. You know, when I became a libertarian, quote unquote, I joined Young Americans for Liberty, I had a lot of friends that were anarcho-capitalists. At FIU in 2014, there was a group called the Rothbardian Circle. They literally sat around and read Rothbard. And we had Adam Kokesh debating, oh God, who is that one guy, the crying Nazi, they call him now? He used to be a libertarian.
Oh dear. Is that the one that went to Chicago? Is this the one that's anyway?
He was in the march and he was in Charleston. I don't know what happened to him.
I'm glad none of us remember his name though.
Yeah, so he debated Adam Kokesh. I mean, it was a really cool group, bunch of ANCAPs. One of my good friends, at least a few of them were Mises Institute grads. Another buddy of mine, Lewis, he was a student of Lou Rockwell. So there was a really solid group of like very principled libertarians back when I was a part of y'all at FIU. And then I eventually, chaired the chapter for a few quarters and then, went on. But it was a really good, like, deep dive experience. It took me a while to become an ANCAP, but I finally did.
That's right. Chris Cantwell.
Chris Cantwell. Yeah.
Yeah. Justin O'Donnell mentioned
I don't know
in the
why
comments. He's 100% right.
You had to mention that. I thought we were all happier just not knowing his name, remember his name. That's okay.
But Justin's correct.
And Justin is correct. He is correct. The correctness does rise to the top, indeed.
When it comes to very interesting case.
When it comes to candidates, and this was a question that I heard, actually a good one and an interesting one that I heard at LP Wisconsin. Would you support, regardless, the libertarian nominee for president for office, no matter what?
Yes.
Follow-up would be, and this is why I thought it was an interesting question, what if it's somebody who seems not to have any libertarian principles whatsoever? What if it is like a Donald Trump type that just seems very populist, very, very, take your pick, super, super conservative or incredibly redistributionist? Would you back them then?
So there is a provision in the Constitution for the Libertarian Party is that through a 3/4 vote, the LNC can stop a nomination for a presidential candidate. So if I really felt like, hey, this person is like a neocon, I don't know how he got here. The guy wants to, bomb Palestine and invade Iran and, X, Y, and Z thing or whatever, I would probably, if I really felt like this guy's not good for the philosophy, he doesn't follow the dogma, he's not a part of the brand, I would probably make a push to try to exclude their nomination and reopen nominations for somebody who does. But if they're generally somebody who, is a libertarian who may not have been a popular pick, yeah, I'm going to support them because I'm chair of the Libertarian Party. I believe in the philosophy. If they're somebody who's legit a libertarian, why wouldn't I support them as a libertarian nominee? If that's who the delegate selected, I would fanatically support them in any way I could. I don't see why I wouldn't. I think a chair who doesn't support the nominee, I think you have to be a zealot for the cause. You have to really, almost with a religious feel, really believe in this cause. And there's a reason I've been here for 10 years because I really believe in this cause. So to do otherwise, I think it would basically show that, it's treating the party like a condom. You're using it and throwing it away. It's not that type of, unless there's a really good reason, unless you're protecting the party, you should support your nominee.
Absolutely.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. Going to the behavior, and I think that's valid. Going to the behavior of other affiliates, and this is a hypothetical now. This is something that you mentioned. You said something about how, and I don't think these are the exact words, that if you're held responsible for someone's actions, they would answer to you. And I'm interested. Oh yes, that was. If I'm accountable for what you do, I will act on it. What does that look like? So I was interested. That was vague, and I was curious, since there have been things where you've been implicated, what does that look like, you acting on it?
Well, it means that at the very least, we're going to have a conversation that, people don't realize about the LP chair role. It's like, people are like, well, if you're, why all of a sudden Nekhaila is, I don't know, policing speech or whatever. When you're in a role, when you're in a high role in any organization, doesn't matter what it is, you're responsible for what everybody does. So they're naturally going to look at you to say, hey, what are you doing about this? This is damaging the brand. You're the one who needs to say something. Shit rolls uphill. And a lot of people don't get that. So, what people do, if someone on the board does something stupid or someone in a state affiliate does something, of course, naturally people are going to look at whoever's at the top and they're going to say, well, what are you doing about this? And so my perspective is
good reason, right?
Right.
It's,
yeah. That's the way it is. I mean, look, power doesn't come with that responsibility. It's intertwined like this. Somebody who has, if you have no responsibility over something, you have no authority over that same thing. Like, if you don't take care of your kid, then you really don't have any authority over your kid. You know, it's like, and that goes with anything, you know, if it's intertwined. So, you know, for me, it's by bylaws and by constitution, everything else is a limited thing. There's not much I can do. But what I do know how to do is I can call someone up on the phone and say, hey, you know, I don't agree with this, or what can we do to work together to fix this, or whatever. Or I could put them on blast, or I could talk to them privately. That's literally the least I can do. So in my opinion, you know, if someone on the board or somebody, you know, whatever acts out, it's my responsibility to do something about it, because that's the role I took on as chair, is to be the guy who has to do something about it. And some people are willing to do that. Some people aren't willing to do that. In my business is, if something goes wrong, you know, I have to address it. You know, shit rolls uphill. If customer has a complaint and it's bad enough, even if it's not bad enough, I still have to make sure it gets taken care of. But if it's bad enough, I have to address it with the customer or with the vendor or whatever the case is. So, you know, I believe in getting involved in that kind of thing. I don't think it's wise to shy away from conflict. I think sometimes you have to get involved in order to show people that, you know, at the very least, you're willing to make it uncomfortable for them if they want to continue doing something that's wrong. Or if there's, you know, people fighting or whatever, hey, listen, go hug it out in the freezer, you know, like, you know, go fight about it in the parking lot, whatever, but address it and get it over with so we can move on as a group.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question here is, for Grand Rapids, does that mean we have an official, actual octagon that we can go and beat the shit out of each other? And
I'm totally down.
Okay.
I'm not against it. If the Professional Wrestling
Someone-
Caucus wants to set up an octagon, then by all means, we can definitely fight it out.
Some of the criticism, I think, and we've discussed this already, but some of the criticism has been that the talking, I think, has not done much, has not resolved much. And so the question is, I think, is it getting addressed, or are we just talking? Are you making calls and then nothing's really happening?
Well,
as an addition there, because, you know, a lot of us have seen the snippets from Mike Shaner, right? And so the one thing is that there's only 4 people out of the entire LNC that are trying at all to raise money, and only one of them is being successful. So, you know, just as a framing for that, to move together with it.
Okay. Well, I can tell you, at least this month, there's 4 people that, at least maybe 4, maybe 5 people. When that report came, when the original draft of the report came out, it was about a month ago. We started tracking phone calls around that time and handing out links for everybody to donate towards. I think in the last 4 weeks or so, we probably had 4 or 5 people actually really participate in fundraising and making phone calls. So that number is not 1, it's a little bit higher now, and hopefully it will expand. The LNC is going to have at some point a call with all the LNC members, training on how to make phone calls properly and how to use Kixie and all that stuff, but mostly just how to do an effective sales call. So I know some people might be waiting on that, but there's no excuse just to start putting a link out there and seeing, you know, talking to your friends and saying, hey, donate, or whatever the case is. So we're still in that transition phase where I'm getting the whole board involved in the process of, hey, you know, this is mandatory now. We're not just, it's not a suggestion. If we don't do this, we're fucked. So you either get your ass on the phone and make some phone calls, or do something to make money, or you're useless to me. So it's one or the other. And, you know, that's basically the sentiment, you know, moving forward from here. And then as far as, you know, do words matter? I think they kind of do. And I'll tell you why. I think they matter more than the people on the other end are willing to admit. I think when you say something and, you know, people see it, it's kind of uncomfortable to be called out, and it kind of sucks. And, you know, certain people might not be willing to admit that, yeah, maybe, you know, are they willing to do what they did again? Hey, maybe they are. I don't know. If they want to be masochists, sure. I mean, it's literally the least I can do. Might be the most I can do at this point. But, you know, it at least sets an example for other affiliates and other people that, hey, this is the standard. We're not going to be cool with, you know, talking shit like idiots to random strangers and thinking that's something. We want to be a party that actually is, I mean, look, if you want to talk shit to politicians or whatever, fine. But, there needs to be at least a set standard as far as, let me put it this way. There's people who think looks don't matter. I personally believe looks matter a lot. I think anybody who says looks don't matter is full of shit and is lying to you. And I can, objectively say looks absolutely matter. When people look at you, they judge you before they even talk to you. And so as an organization, I take that same principle. When people look at us, what do they see? Because they're judging us the second they see us. So what do they judge us by? And, that matters a lot to me. I think Robert Greene says, guard your reputation with your life. I've always agreed with that. I think, what's in the surface matters very much. What's underneath the surface matters too, but that people don't see that right away. And they're not going to give you a fair shake if they don't like what's on the surface. So I think holding ourselves to a greater level of accountability is very important. I think the chair can do that to a degree. I think the organization really has to kind of be unified in that if it's going to actually happen. Some people are going to be disingenuous and say, oh, it's free speech or whatever. Well, I mean, I can make a lot of arguments to why, you should care about how you're perceived. And maybe what I'm doing isn't the most effective thing. It's not going to change everybody's mind. But there's only so much I can do within my power that is going to actually make a difference. And I'll do what I can, whether it's a carrot or a stick, to try to make a difference if I can. Whether I'm successful or not at that, we'll see. But I think it does make some degree of difference, and I'm willing to fight for that degree of difference if it does manifest itself. I wish I could do more, but
so I've got a intertwined question that's coming again from the LPA Discord. And it's one that's interesting to me as I was on Chase's team. It's, I, as a background, because I don't think we've talked about this before, I've been a libertarian for 25 years. Listening to Bush and Al Gore argue about nothing, and then Harry Brown come in and be like, those two are fucking stupid. Liberty is the way. Was just like, oh, that's the man right there. So Harry Brown absolutely sold me on. I
wish he was still alive.
Yeah,
I mean, God bless him.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he was one of the best communicators we've ever had.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
So, I am personal friends with Chase, but I followed Chase. I didn't become personal friends with Chase until the presidential campaign. I followed Chase and did some stumping for Chase for his senatorial campaign, but knowing him personally didn't happen until the presidential campaign. Chase was my first choice for our presidential nominee, with Mike Tremont as our second. So from my perspective, it was just like the stars have aligned. We have the right presidential candidate here. So I was, and I've been following for 25 years. I've seen a lot of candidates. I've seen, there was a big split with the Ron Paul revolution in 2008 versus Bob Barr. I don't think anyone in the comments, anyone watching this would disagree with me when I say that Bob Barr is probably the worst candidate we've had in the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. He's a Republican, right? And I understood why we went for him, the whole hope that he would bring in money, and then he didn't. But so I guess my question, and the question coming from here along, and I'm twisting it to my own means.
I was going to say this comes from the LPA Discord, and it's all about you. That's
yeah, it really is. It inspired a question, I guess, is more correct.
There.
I watched as the LNC response to Chase was unusual. I watched as Angela wouldn't walk in with our candidates, as she was like, well, at least our candidates are going to pull from Democrats. And to me, that was unacceptable for a chair, right? This is, like, we have bylaws in this for a reason. We've got the things where everyone on the board is supposed to support this person. and it was a weak response from the LNC until Joe Hanush is in our comments and he's on the comms team, until Joe started posting about our candidates properly toward the end of the 2024 election cycle. We weren't even seeing about candidates in general. So I guess my question here, now that I've rambled and told you a bit of a background, is, where do you stand with Chase? Where did you stand during the campaign? Where do you stand with Mike? Because Mike Tremont, I think, is also an important one. He's a little more Mises aligned. I know that there's a little bit of a different difference in ideology there. So, it's kind of an open-ended. This is a failure of a question on my part, but if you want to talk about this one.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I'll say this. I say that when the voting came about for president, I think I voted for Josh Smith in the first few rounds. Mm-hmm. And then I think I voted for Rechtenwald before the gummy. I was front stage for that. That was wild, man. God bless him, man, because I don't know. Kind of feel bad for him on that. I would feel uncomfortable talking to like a cute girl at the bar if I was that high, but talking in front of all the media anyway. Talking in front of all the media.
Rechtenwald may not have a whole lot of sympathy for Amanda's existence.
Oh no.
I don't think he would ever want to be my friend, but it's very suspicious of me.
So I voted for him, and then I think it was a final round, and it was like Noda versus, I don't know if I voted for Mike after that. I don't remember. It was a little fuzzy, but I think I voted for Rechtenwald. I don't know if Rechtenwald got canceled out, and then I might have voted for Tremont. And then it was Noda versus, Chase. And of course I was like, well, yeah, I'll vote for Chase. And I've known Chase actually when I was Region 2 rep. So Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee were Region 2 right. When I was Region 2 rep. And so
Region 2 when things were reasonable.
when things were simpler back in the old days. Now it's like Alabama and Alabama and Louisiana are part of Region 2. Or Mississippi. Yeah. Sorry. And so I've known Chase for many years. And, when I saw, and I'll be honest with you, I thought that both him and Mike, so I think this was the day before voting. And I might have just realized something here, but this was the day before voting. And I remember seeing Rechtenwald, Mike, and Chase on stage after Trump just got off. And a lot of people already left, the MAGA people left. And I was like, wow. I saw them both two on stage, and they had this like electric energy to them, and they're both going around and whatever, and they were really good. They looked really good on stage together, and they were saying the right things, and the media was eating it up and everything. I heard talking to Mike, and I was like, man, Mike, I saw him at one of the after parties or whatever, the events, and I was like, man, you and Chase really, you guys make a good team. You guys both look really good up there on stage. And he's like, yeah, thanks, and all this and that. And I don't know if he thought about it or whatever, but anyway, they both ended up being, president and vice presidential candidates. And I've known Mike Tremont because he was down in Florida. The first time I met Mike Tremont, we were at an anti-masking, anti-COVID lockdown rally down in like Fort Lauderdale Beach. And Mike gave a speech, and then I came up after him, and I gave it to a group of bunch of libertarians and non-libertarians that were there, and it was really cool. And then we marched, and apparently we got in like an anti-DeSantis ad somehow. Really interesting. But I think to your general point, I supported Chase when Mike came down to Florida and Miami. I sat right with him and talked to him and Jim, and I asked him how I could help and whatnot. And I'll say this about the campaign. I wish I had more money. I think one of the big handicaps of the campaign was lack of funds. I think my first presidential campaign was with Gary Johnson back in 2016. So I know back then they had 50 states of organizers. I actually wrote to the Key West Blue paper. So if you go look up my name on the Key West Blue paper, I wrote an article back in 2016. So from Key West to Pensacola, we had writers writing editorials for Gary Johnson. They had a lot more money. I think they had like $10-15 million. Bill Weld brought in a lot of money too, of course, even though he endorsed Hillary Clinton and many other things that I wasn't a fan of. Jo Jorgensen, she didn't have as much money as them, but she still made a pretty good impact. I think if you look at Chase's platform, he was a libertarian. He did he was a libertarian. He agreed with us. He had a solid platform. I wish. Look, I wasn't in the campaign. I don't know what they could have done better. I know it was going to be a tough year, regardless of, even if it was Rectenwald, I think it would have been tough. If it was Lars, Lars was self-funded. Maybe he would have done a little bit better. Who knows? It's hard to say. It's all Monday night kind of couch quarterbacking or whatever, Monday Night Football kind of stuff.
A lot of cliches just floated into the room. That's
a lot of sports-related cliches. Yeah. And I'm not even a big sports guy, but I supported him. I wish he would have done better. Am I disappointed that the LNC or and certain members of the LNC did what they could to discourage and shit on his campaign? Yeah, I am. I think it's inappropriate.
I do know. Sorry, if you want to wrap up.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that I think that, as a board member, you should openly support the candidate. As a rank and file member, I can't expect you to do anything. You're going to do what you're going to do. But as a board member, as a leader, you should support the candidate.
Right.
And to see so many states try to turn on Chase or whatever, it was unfortunate. It was unfortunate. But, hopefully in 2028 or whatever, when J.D. Vance runs for prez or whatever the heck that happens there, I hope we get a good candidate who steps up and hopefully can raise a lot of money and get a lot of media and, spread the good word of the philosophy and go and be an apologist and an evangelist for the cause. That's all I can hope for.
I do know that when it was pitched, that Chase was willing to, albeit unhappily, work with Rectenwald, and that then Michael Heiss was 100% against it and worked to actively block it. And I know that there have been, there was tension between you and like a pro-Heiss faction and an anti-Heiss faction when you first came onto the board. I can recall, you expressing an intent to keep Michael Heiss on, at least in the short term. He was later terminated. And I don't know this specifically, I don't know this directly, but there was an allegation that you had told the Mises Caucus in private that you were going to keep Heiss on or whatever. Who knows whether that's true. But was it always your intent to kind of wait for the right moment and have Heiss let go? Or was it more of a, after careful consideration, discussing with multiple people, probably being badgered by even more? What was the calculus there? And when did it go into effect?
So I'm always very highly respectful of staff. And so, what I'll say is that we made some cuts to staff. Anything that wasn't directly involved in crucial operations or making money was cut. Heiss wasn't the only cut that was made. And the reduction seemed unfavorable to both parties. So it's, at the time, it seemed to me like a mutual parting of ways, because no hay plata, there's no money. We can't afford to pay for things that, aren't immediately making us money. And so that, of course, was a major decision in most of my decisions over the past 3 months, is what's making us money and what's not crucial. Because when I ran at the convention, I said, look, I'll take the Javier Milei approach. Whatever's not bolted on the floor, we need to cut, even if maybe in other circumstances we wouldn't normally cut, or if there's value or whatever. But right now we have to fucking cut because we don't have any money. And so for the people that, want to see certain things forward, where's the money? Where's the fucking money? Because we don't have it. We don't have any goddamn money. Yep. So until we can fundraise and make money, everything needs to be towards making money. And so that's where the conversations with Perry Willis, of course, have been coming in. I have some conversations coming up with a data person who may be coming on potentially to do the data stuff. But my main goal right now is everything has to do with making money and, stopping the bleed and getting us to a point where we're at bare minimum breaking even, but I want us to be profitable, of course, and prosperous, and getting us to that point where we're making money and we're on good footing. That's where we need to go. And so anything that's not that, even when it comes to LNC time, needs to be cut. So if there's non-essential committee work, I want it cut. I want everybody to be on the phones, focusing on fundraising, focusing on doing what needs to be done, instead of focusing on non-essential things. So, seeing how dire the situation is, and being in the position that I've been in for the last 90 days or so, there's a sense of urgency there that I hope people can appreciate.
Absolutely, yeah.
But they might not.
Well, no, it was a curiosity, and I guess now the question is, this throws a lot of them into one category. What are your plans to reconcile some of the tension between these warring factions, right? I mean, there's some people like you, some people don't, some people will and won't listen to you. And then, there are people within the ranks who are not going to talk to one another. What's your thinking about unification, or whether that's possible or advisable?
It's a tough prospect, but I think if you look at the I'm sure it'll be leaked here in the future, but in the operational report, one of the things that's harped on is a unifying vision for the board. And one of the things that I campaigned on and talked about is the need, in order to unify the party, you have to have a collective vision. And I've always believed that when I was LPF chair, and even now, you have to have everybody moving in the same direction. Because if I think one thing and Kyle thinks one thing, and maybe Amanda, you might agree with me or agree with Kyle, we're going to move in 2 or 3 different directions. But if we can agree as a board, look, we're setting the vision. We want PDR. Okay, cool. We want to defend the guard. Fuck yeah. Okay. We want to raise money and raise membership. Okay, cool. How do we get there? Then we work with staff and come up with a plan, and we move in the right direction. So in order to diffuse tension, ultimately what you need to do is you need to create buy-in.
Yeah.
And if the RADs and the CLC and the Mises people and all the GDIs, through their representatives or whatever, say, look, this is what we want to see from the organization. We might not get everything we want, but we can at least feel comfortable that, hey, at least I have buy-in, and I have, what I want is being worked on by the LNC, and we're moving in that direction. And then the competition doesn't become, well, I want this and you want that. It becomes, well, you're in my way of getting to this goal, or you're either with us or you're either a part of the problem or part of the solution, or maybe there's some competition where, well, I'm doing more work than you, but we're both moving the same direction. And Robert Greene actually talks this in Laws of Human Nature. There's a whole chapter that I wrote down in my notebook verbatim, probably 20 pages, where he talks about the need for, when organizations are in dysfunction, and it comes because there's no overarching goal. And people tend to devolve into smaller groups, and they go after their own self-interest. And I think factually, that's what we've seen in the party for so many years. And if I can try to accomplish one thing, I would like to see everybody kind of winning a little bit and getting a little bit of what they want, rather than the pendulum swinging one way or the other and overcorrecting. And so, I want to see everybody kind of winning a little bit, getting a little bit of what they want, and moving in a progressive direction, rather than regressing and, maybe the pendulum overcorrecting and, moving in, just constantly doing this every 2 years. I think that's the best case scenario for everybody. And if we're moving in a healthy direction, we're growing as a party, we're getting candidates elected and all that kind of stuff, it's hard to argue against that. And I think it's a good idea. I think PDR is a great idea. I think Defend the Guard is a great concept. And I think the board agrees on, hey, we need membership, we need fundraising. So everything else is kind of splitting hairs at that point. Hopefully we can get there as a board professionally and not cause too much drama on the way to get there. But that's what we need as an organization. That's what we need to survive. And I think, if the board can focus on Archimedes, and first we're going to target lapsed members over the last several years. It's the lowest hanging fruit. Then we're going to start looking at prospecting through registered libertarians or registered libertarians in all 50 states. Well, maybe not all 50, but at least 28, 30, something like that, where it's actually party registration. We have Aristotle data. We can run it through Aristotle, upend the data, hit people through emails, direct mail, categorize the direct mail folks, texting, social media, Google, etc. Hit them in many different ways, get them to join the party, see what works, see what doesn't work, and work on our prospecting, because we have to grow as a party. We can't just rely on, oh, you found us one day through a candidate or whatever. We have to have a solid prospecting process. We have to keep our people happy. We have to have, solid, as best we can, as far as retention goes, do our best effort there. But as I said earlier, even if you have 100% retention, you're still going to you're still going to lose people. So in reality, we're at 30, 50% retention at best, probably closer to 25%, 30%. You need to grow consistently in order to build. So we have to figure out ways to do that. And we have to appeal to a large portion of the population. It can't just be MAGA people. It can't just be Democrats. It has to be a broad spectrum of the population who agrees with us on most issues. Bring them into the party, radicalize them later, grow the party, and get their money. Keep our 80% of our donors happy, which is probably a small amount of people, but also grow the small donor base. I mean, it's not rocket science at the end of the day, but this is what we need to do in order to survive.
When it comes to the question and getting people, having a unifying vision for the board, do you feel like that's been happening? Do you feel like we've been moving toward that?
Yeah, a little bit in some ways, but in other ways, I don't even know if people know what they want. to be completely honest with you. I think first and foremost, people have to put the board first and recognize, okay, what do I want to get out of this? What does my faction or my side or me personally want out of this organization? That's board members. That's a question board members are going to have to ask themselves. And then it's just a matter of coming up with, 2 or 3 goals and working with staff to say, what's the feasibility of this? How do we get there? And a lot of it over the last 90 days has been me working very closely with staff and trying to figure out how do we get there and coming up with some of the ideas and, working on sort of the mechanics of it. But eventually it's going to have to not be coming from me. It's going to be having to come from the board. And I think even future chairs are going to have to. What I'd like to see, to be honest with you, is a board where the chair comes in and all the chair does is, deal with a little bit of operations, but not really, but mostly be a facilitator and do the Roberts broader definition of what a chair does, and be the face of the party and go out there and talk to donors and be the messenger and do all that fun stuff, but basically be an accessory to staff when it comes to the actual vision, or to the board when it comes to an actual vision. And the board sets a collective vision working with staff, and staff says, yes, this is possible. No, it's not possible. These are the resources we need to carry out this vision. And the executive director has the power, to carry out the board's vision in the way that he or she sees fit, and that the chair really isn't that important, and that the board's collective vision is important, and that the executive director is probably more important than the board, and that staff has, a sense of consistency through generation and generation of LNC. I think that's probably the ideal setup of the LNC wants to survive long term. Because if you have somebody from the Mises Caucus running and saying, well, we have to, flush them out and we need to go and, go in this direction, and you have somebody from the CLC saying the exact opposite, what it does is it creates a very frustrating position for staff because they don't know their future. These people that actually have jobs working for us. And they're good at their jobs because they work 40, 50 hours a week doing what we wish we could do full time, but we don't because we're volunteers, although some of us do. So I think an ideal scenario is it doesn't really matter who's chair. It may matter more who's on the board and who's a good leader, and setting a collective vision and have good hard workers to fill the different roles and capacities and the day-to-day, and decide what the vision is. And then let staff handle it. I think that would be the healthiest, best way for the board. And by the way, this is verbatim. I had lunch with Debbie last week, and she agrees. And this is what's in the report. If anybody's wondering what's in the report, it's basically this idea that there's a bit of a separation of powers between the LNC and staff, and that we're respecting that separation. The chair doesn't have so much power to dictate and be the proprietor of the organization, and it's not as important of a role.
Yeah,
and
the one thing that I would, there have been conversations about staff in the past and the importance of staff, which I absolutely agree with. I am one of those people who thinks that the decisions about the party's future should be being made by the people that members of the party elect. And not people that, executives within the party hire. But it sounds like what you're saying is that they're, these are the people who administrate that vision. The only thing that I get concerned about is, putting up another barrier between the actual members of the party and then the vision for the party, right? I feel like it should come from the members, but I don't think there's a disagreement there.
It's not so much about letting staff decide the vision. It's the board sets the vision, but there's a certain point where rubber meets the road, and it's like, okay, part of our vision is fielding 500 candidates over the next 2 years, 3 years. Well, staff might come back and say, I think there's a saying. It's like, what is it? It's like, if you have a plan, then God will laugh in your face or something like that. I forget the exact wording, but maybe staff needs to be like, ha ha ha, 500 candidates. We're going to need to raise an extra 50 grand or 100 grand or 250, whatever, or we need these systems in place. So, to have this vision is great. It's very difficult. It's hard for an LNC to carry out such a vision. Not impossible. We have a CSC and this and that, and we have good people. But I think ultimately what we want to do is raise enough money to where, if we had enough money, if money was no object, we could hire a team. We hire a director level position for, candidate support. And that person might have 3 subordinates. And all they do is focus on the goal of reaching 500 candidates fielded, making sure they're well equipped and making sure they're trained and everything else. But all that requires money and resources we don't have. So, the team may come back and staff may come back and say, well, maybe it's more realistic that it's instead of 1,000, it's 500. Instead of 500, it's 400 or whatever. And this is what we need if we're going to get there. So Nekhaila, as chair, you need to go talk to the top 5 donors and get them to make a max donation this year so we can fund this project. Okay, cool. Whatever the case is. In an ideal setup, we would have enough money where we have a fundraising director. We'd have a whole fundraising department with, people in that department that could go warm up donors and find new donors and set them up with the chair and build that relationship or whatever. And then, you have teams of people. I was in the offices of Young Americans for Liberty. They have tons of people in there. We used to have tons of people in our office in Virginia. Now everybody's all around the country, but we used to have more staff 5 years ago than we do today, So, my goal is if we can get up on fundraising, if we can get up on membership, if we can continue the trend of increasing our membership and fundraising long enough to where we're making the money, we can expand our staff, we can expand our capacity. Suddenly the LNC becomes a little less important. We can focus on more of the vision, the trivial, the day-to-day, the political, whatever. Set the vision. Staff carries out that vision. They have a vested interest in it. It just makes us a lot better, because the reality is, if you add up the average LNC member's contribution to the LNC, you're looking at a few days, like hour-wise, a few meetings, the couple hours a month in the LNC, maybe some committee work. The average LNC member probably spends about a week, over a term in actual man hours. I know Paul and I are putting in 30, 40 hours a week, but, we have to. But, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to, but we have to. But the average LNC member puts in maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks if we're being generous for the board. The average staff member puts in 30 hours to 50 hours a week for 52 weeks a year. So the wise thing is you have really smart, really well-meaning people on staff. You expand staff, you pay them to carry out the goals. And I think that's a lot more important than the board.
Kyle has a question. Sorry, Kyle.
Go for it. I think I've gone long enough.
I need to go, and I'm going to plug in my computer. My battery works now, everyone who's watching. So I will be listening, but not on camera for a second. Kyle, I know, has a question about ranked choice voting from someone who wanted. All right. Take it away.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the alternative voting schemes like RCV, approval, star, etc.? It's a Pareto improvement for the current system. Also, to show why it's so important, Javier Milei would have lost badly under a U.S.-style first-past-the-post system. Are we trying to coalition with some of these people who are pushing for this in the U.S. right now to show, especially like the Javier Milei fans, because there's a lot of them, right? So,
and when I was chair of Florida, we worked with the Green Party to kill top two. So top two, basically, even in a general election or a primary, if you have two Republicans or two Democrats or whatever, they move on to the general elections. It's literally the top two vote getters. So it's been really bad for third parties. It was already passed in California years ago. We killed it like shy of 2 points. We work with the Greens to come up with these mailers and these handouts. We made these like little like rat cards that we made like 40,000 of, and I shipped them out to all the Green and LP affiliates across the state. And I don't know to what degree we had an impact, but we gave out like 40,000 rat cards, and we beat it by 2%. So we've had some influence there, hopefully. And then so when we had really good terms with the Greens, we actually partnered with Rock the Vote, I believe it's called, and they're the central organization that passed ranked choice voting in a couple different states. And so we work with the Greens directly. Literally, Libertarians and Greens founded ranked choice voting, the organization here in Florida. So it literally came from the Greens and the Libertarians. Like, our board members came together and formed this organization. So I think it's a great thing. I think it's something that could really, really help us out. I don't necessarily know how it's working out in states that already passed it. Maybe there's some data out there, but I think it's a better voting system than first past the post. I think Libertarians should be supporting it, and I think it definitely makes things a lot fairer, and it gives people an opportunity to say, there's a lot of people that said, well, if you voted for Gary Johnson in 2016, you wasted your vote. And I say, well, if you voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016, you wasted your vote because she didn't win. So, if there was an opportunity to get people, well, after that, I'd rather vote for, Gary Johnson or Jill Stein or whatever, it gives a lot more power to the Libertarians. And if anything, it forces politicians to try to cater to us through, trying to adopt our platform or whatever. But yeah, no, I support it. I think we should be doing more to really push for ranked choice voting. I think it could be really revolutionary if more states pick it up. It could be very helpful for us electorally.
I have a question. Sorry, did you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going to point out that the data was mentioned again, and I am still, very excited about Project Archimedes, and this would not be my first data project, having done this for 20 years. So
nice.
I am still totally willing to help and make sure to drive this. I'm still.
Are you on IS committee?
I am.
Okay. Are you working with Paul Dar on some of this stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
This cool. Is a perfect segue because I have a question from Joel Getz, who wants to know. Ask him why he keeps saying I'll be considered for the social media team, but then I never hear from anyone.
I gave all the social media applicants to our PR guy. I will bug him again to go through it and interview folks because I was sincere when I gave the list over, so I will follow up on that. But we could always use volunteers, not just for social media, but for everything. So if somebody's interested, reach out. I
do know you've lost at least one person on social media recently. So
exactly
the Kanye thing, yes. Did you have one more?
Just as a follow up on it, it's right now we're in a spot where I've been taking a break from some of the more stressful work that I've been doing, and so like I have the free time right now to actually like drive this. I am excited about it, legitimately.
Welcome to a televised live job interview between Stephen Nekhaila and Kyle Davis.
Right now. Yeah.
I mean, I'm down, man. Let's do it. We're gonna hit the ground running. I'm really excited about Archimedes. I thought about changing the name. I was like, should it be like Archimedes 2.0 or should we call it something else? But I think everybody loves and knows Archimedes.
I've been privately trying to convince people that it should be named after Hugin and Moonin, Odin's ravens, who are his eyes and ears around the world, knowing and bringing back information to him so he knows everything.
Is that that's kind of? Is that the? Oh, okay.
So
I mean, I'm down.
I'm a big fan of that type of mythology. So
yeah, no, this is gonna be big. I mean, let me tell you, like we're basically, I mean, quite frankly, we're dropping everything we're doing and focusing on getting ready for this big push for Archimedes. So I'm very excited about it. Staff seems very excited about it. So what people don't know or don't realize is that there's a lot of IT that goes in the LNC. I think I heard it said that every company is an IT company. Well, the LNC, unfortunately, is also an IT company. We switched over from Civi over to Zoho. I like Zoho a lot. There's a lot of functionality there. Staff loves Zoho. So it's been cool. But there's a lot more even than that to get the functionality going to do this project. And we got a really good team, man. We got some smart people. We got a lot of smart volunteers. And we're pretty close. I would say maybe a month or so away. We're really kicking this thing off. Maybe in the next 2 months we'll be in sixth gear here. So yeah, it's the first time I've seen a fundraising push on the LNC since I've been on the board.
When you were mentioning
Zoho has me nervous.
I like it.
I know
personally.
It's not about the way it looks or the way it works. It's about the cost. We've got like the FEC records that we keep track of and that we've been trying to add to the data warehousing. So since we started to spin up the Zoho project, we spent $72,000 on Zoho. Whereas like for Civi, even when we were switching over to it, it was at most 10 grand a year, including staff. And the 72 is just on the ETL swap over and the cost for Zoho, not including our own people. So like it's been a lot. So we're kind of looking at a tool that, it's definitely prettier and it's definitely easier to use than Civi. But I feel like we could build out some of those front end things for Civi, especially now that like Ken Molman's back involved and everything else. So I've been nervous about it, considering like we're low on money, right? Like we've been talking about it all tonight, and so we're doing something that just for Zoho's base is 16 grand a year, and Zoho is a per user, and we don't have enough users as is, so it's going to be more expensive than 16 grand a year. I've been worried about it, I guess is the way to start this one.
I'm not qualified enough to speak at length on Zoho. I'm sure we'd have staff that would know a lot more than I do. My understanding is with Civi, and I don't know the details of that either completely, but I know when I voted on it back in 2018, when Nick Sarek was still chair, I remember we funded it pretty well. I don't remember exactly how much, but it was a pretty good amount. We had quite a bit of staff, at least back then we did, on the front end of Civi. I heard Civi's been very, good, user-friendly for people that are like really into Civi. But for people that are just laymen, I know it's been a lot more of a learning curve. Zoho, my understanding is that we have some people that we've been able to pay as contractors. They have like people that you can pay to build in functionality. that have been pretty reasonable to help to get it to where it needs to be. So at this point, we are pretty much in the process that we've fully converted over to Zoho. Maybe there's some more functionality or things that we're looking to do, but the suite has a lot of tie-ins with different tools. So you've got Kixie, you've got, just all kinds of different stuff that can be tied in. I don't know what the Civi ecosystem. I'm not a CRM nerd, so I really don't know much. Sure. I'm technical. Like I can probably pick up on that stuff pretty good, but I don't know, the full extent of it. But from what I hear, from staff, they like it. We're good. I think the cost will probably start to go down since we're pretty built out. But of course, all this stuff is there to help us make money. So if we're not utilizing it at its highest capacity to actually use the data and use the functionality to make money, then, even if I know some affiliates that use, what is it? Nation Builder, which is $10,000 a year, and maybe not. They're using it to make $10,000 a year. Well, they might just like the functionality, but
I guess I thought that the LNC ended up voting on Zoho.
We did, yeah. I think we did at one point. If not mistaken, I think so.
All right, it's So I guess that's kind of in my head. The thing here is like, if we voted on it, then it seems like we should have had a pretty good understanding of what's going on, and it's, as I've talked to people, it's been a like, we didn't really know how to fix Civi. I was like, okay, well, we were paying Alan Shaw for that. Mm-hmm. Why wasn't Alan pointed at it? Because I know like Alan Shaw, right? And I know that he wasn't pointed to fix Civi. So it's kind of this weird thing in my head of like, well, why did we go to Zoho when we were paying someone to fix Civi and then not asking them to fix Civi? Does that make sense?
It does. I'm probably not the best person to ask because I know it's more of a technical thing with staff and everything else. They could probably answer a lot better. But I think the big difference between Zoho and Civi, my understanding, is one's open source, one's more closed source. Yep. And there's some pros and cons there. Because with the open source stuff, you have to build out your own functionality, where the closed source stuff, you can build out some functionality, but a lot of it's already there. And so it's a matter of how much time and money do we have to be our own, to build out our own functionality, which was the original idea of Civi, versus just having a package, already ready to go out of the box. And so, you almost have to go. I mean, I think either option you take, you almost have to really be cavalier either way. And if you're not completely cavalier, you kind of don't get what you want. So, I don't know. Maybe if we were more cavalier about Civi, we would have gotten what we want. But, again, all this stuff costs time and money. But I'm pretty satisfied with where we're at with Zoho right now, at the very least. And, maybe if I spent more time learning about it, I'd probably have a better opinion on it. But
hopefully
I'm trying to build the functionality for it right now.
Yeah.
So it should be good.
Good.
Yeah, hopefully the costs go down. When you spoke a little while ago about potential regrets, things like that, you said there were various votes where maybe you'd abstained and shouldn't have abstained. Mm-hmm. And that's a difficult thing for a chair, figuring out when to do that and when not to do that. Well, looking forward, we're wondering, are there any things about which you feel so strongly you can say right now you would vote against the LNC if there were? And we touched on them a little bit. We touched on a few hypotheticals, right? But things that are so strong in terms of issues for you that you would, that you would be that decisive vote.
I'm trying to think of what's potentially out there or would be upcoming that would be controversial enough for, a controversial vote.
I mean, I think LPNH is probably a decent example, right? So it came down and the board was perfectly split. So chair vote matters. Disaffiliate or not for LPNH.
He said he would abstain, though.
Well, yeah, right. But an abstention at that point is effectively a no, right?
Yeah, I'd probably abstain or vote no on a disaffiliation vote. I don't think disaffiliation is generally ever a good idea. But my main thing over the next 12 months is really, a lot of it, yeah, there's votes, but a lot of it is just like communication. A lot of it's making shit happen. So, coming up with the idea of doing the phone calls, the phone banking, I called on Adrian Malagon. I'm like, hey man, you do this for a living. Can you set up a phone banking thing? And Larry Sharp also, he was interested in being involved as well, because he does that. He does a very good job at that. So he's wanting to do a little training with the board and helping us with learning how to close on phone calls and things like that. So, like, for instance, that was an initiative that I took. Another one is Archimedes, working with Paul. Paul set up that call, but together we worked it out to get to where we are today. So that was another big initiative. So a lot of, I think, my goals over the next 12 months is not just necessarily votes, but making the initiative to make things happen, and working with staff and working with Hannah in a way, and the team, understanding them, understanding what they do, and helping them and trying to facilitate what do we need to move forward, coming up with the ideas and the plans and the goals to fundraise. Like, all those things are initiatives. So, as far as votes, nothing comes to mind immediately, although I have had 3 glasses of whiskey, so that might be why. So, is there going to be, I don't know, we'll see what happens as far as, is there a big controversial vote on the horizon? I don't know. There probably will be. And we'll see what happens. But to me, my mind is more on the big initiatives as to how do we get to our goal of being at least net neutral, if not net positive, fundraising. How do we get positive membership? How do we fund PDR? How do we, help defend the guard team? Those are all things we decided as a board so far in our collective vision that these are things that we want. So, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Like, I wake up, I dream of the Libertarian Party. I wake up in the middle of the night, thinking of ways I need to call this person. I need to do this. I need to figure out this problem. I need to do this thing. It's really consumed me in a way where I feel responsible enough that I need to set the initiative and work with the people that do the most work on the board and the ones that don't, to figure out, okay, how do we work together? How do we best utilize the team that we have to make things happen? And who do I need to call? Who do I need to work with that may have the answer to help make things happen? So I think you're probably going to see more initiatives than maybe controversial votes. So you'll probably will see both. Right now the big initiative is Archimedes and, making money and working, with donors, and in the near term, that's probably what you're going to see the most of. And, in 6 months, we might be having a different conversation, but that's where we're at.
Is it true that the LNC LP is still running at a deficit? I saw that go by in the comments, and I wanted to make sure to bring that up.
So it depends on the month. This past month, we were positive 11,000, but we also got some KVF funding. When the KVF funding completely runs out, we're probably going to be somewhere between $5,000 to $30,000 in the hole. And it's hard to say exactly when we're going to be in the hole and when we're not. And it depends on what initiatives do we have that we're going to be spending money on, and how much money are we bringing in. So over the next 2 years, luckily, there's not going to be a lot of ballot access spending, if any at all. We just paid for our audit, $20,000. We paid for that, or we're going to pay for that, pretty soon. So there's big expenses that are being paid here that come in certain fashions. And we are selling the building. So that's a big chunk of change that's going to go towards fundraising. Quite literally, when I say stop the bleed, I mean it. We need to stop the bleed. So we are at a negative without the KVF, and that's a big reality that I hope the board and people understand. Now, it doesn't mean things are hopeless and there's no hope, and if things are falling apart completely, we have a cushion, we have time, but we are working on Archimedes and getting the people back to, hopefully fill that gap and then go beyond that. So there is a plan in place and actionable steps to get there. We're not quite there yet, but we're spinning up to it, here pretty soon. And we've got good people to do it. But the reality is, we do, I think in January we were down 30,000. Yeah. Maybe it was February. And then in March, we're down a little bit less. And, this month we're actually positive. April, we're positive 11,000. So, It varies, and it's hard to predict exactly how much it's going to vary because we don't have enough monthly donors to give a precise number. I mean, we know how much we make a monthly donors, but beyond that, how much we fundraise as individuals, how much we get in one-time donations varies. So there's not a predictable source of income for us to rely on and say next month we're going to make X amount of dollars guaranteed. So that means expenditures need to come down, cuts need to be made, or projects need to be delayed.
Can be cut.
I mean, at this point, the only things left is voter gravity, which we're paying about $3,000 a month for. But we do get Aristotle data through that, so I don't want to cut it if we don't have to. But in case of emergency, we could cut that. We spend around $22,000 a year on building liabilities. So that's around, $2,000 a month there. So it's $5,000 a month if we, count them both together. Where that building's going to be gone soon.
We can transition you back away from Office 365.
Yeah, I mean, I hate Microsoft with a passion. It's terrible. It's the worst UI I've ever dealt with. It's awful. It's absolutely terrible. When it works, it's terrible. I like Google a lot more. I don't know why we switched. I think we got a better deal financially, but I like Google a lot. So what else is there to cut? I mean, there's things here and there, but I mean, once you get to the point, there's a certain point where you're cutting payroll. And, payroll is our biggest expense. So, there becomes a certain point where if you cut any more, you're not going to make any more money because you're cutting essential services and essential personnel and staff. So there almost comes a point where you have to spend more money to make money. But there's a fine line between spending money to making money and spending money just to spend money. So, it's probably only a couple $1,000, but you have to be careful.
So you talked about you talked about how we need to cut, but now it sounds like there's not really much more that we can cut without losing money.
When I first became chair, I sat down with Hannah. I said, look, what can give me a list of things that we can either cut or we can, renegotiate. So one of those things was voter gravity. And I talked to the voter gravity team and I said, look, give us a better deal. We're really not looking to spend this much money. And they said, well, we're already giving you the best deal we have and blah, 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 blah. But you're not using it to the best of your capabilities. Like, here's how you can use it even more in your fundraising and everything else. And so I told my team, like, hey, guys, let's talk, let's have a meeting. And they're like, holy shit, I wish we would have known this 2 years ago. So there's more capability we can take advantage of to not only help us, obviously, with our candidates, but to help us as an LNC. So there's opportunity there. There was other things that we just weren't using that were just, artifacts or things that we just didn't need that we could cut. We're getting to the point now where I think at this stage we've cut so much, we're running very bare bones. Now I'm looking at, okay, well, if we bring on, if obviously I want to fundraise the money for whatever we do. If I fundraise a max donation or two, I want to bring on more staff, maybe, retool and maybe, do some internal changes here in a positive way to focus staff on more fundraising and to, carry out this mission or whatever. And so that's what I'm looking at primarily. Sometimes you have to go and fundraise the money in order to do the thing. And sometimes you just kind of have to figure out how to do the thing with what you have, with the liquidity that we have. We've got around $200,000 in liquidity. We're looking to sell the building. So we're going to have close to $750,000 to $1 million in liquidity, which would be a very nice cushion. So even if we're continuing to bleed at the rate we're bleeding, we're still going to have a pretty big cushion. But the idea is not to just buy time, it's to reverse the trend and go positive, right? So both those things are important.
That's the question. Actually, we do have a question from Phil Ryan on this topic with respect to the building. He says, is the money going back to the donors, or is it going to renting a new building? I would imagine the answer is no, based on what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, we so a certain portion of the building mortgage came from the general fund, and a certain amount came from the building fund. We don't have exact records, but we have some records. We can say for certain that at least probably half, roughly, of the building mortgage came from the general fund, and maybe half or less came from the building fund. So we do have we're asking for a ruling from the FEC on how to handle this moving forward, since we know it's going to be a controversial issue. But my intention is to use that money for fundraising and membership growth and everything else that we need, because we need that liquidity. A building is nice to have, but the reality is 5 years ago, everybody lived in DC that we hired, and they worked out of the building. Right now, we've got at least 2 people in Pennsylvania. I think we have 1 person in California, at least maybe 2 in Texas. And there might be some variation there. But the reality is, the talent that we hire lives nationally, sometimes internationally. And we don't need a headquarters in DC. Mm-hmm. If we had everybody move to DC, number one, they'd have to be willing to move to DC, to a high cost area of living, and we'd have to pay them more to live there. Right now, we don't have a use for headquarters. And even if we did, that floor plan that we had is not a modern floor plan. We had 3 levels, and it was all kind of spliced. Mm-hmm. And a modern floor plan is all 1 level. We don't have that. So if we were going to move to a more modern floor plan and an HQ, I would recommend doing something in an area that's a little bit medium to low cost of living, that we didn't have to pay people too much more to want to move there, and then have them work out of the office. But the reality is, we don't need a headquarters, at least not right now. So that's a conversation we can have down the road. Mm-hmm. If we want to have a headquarters. Even if we want to have a headquarters, I still think we should sell the building. I was just watching the Simpsons episode where the LP headquarters moves into like a mall. I don't know if you guys seen that episode.
No.
Yeah. Maybe that's not a terrible idea. Yeah.
I think we understand the argument for not having a building, for selling the building. I think Sure. It was more the concern about our donors who donated to the building going to get that money back and going to see it returned. And I guess that's a no, but
no, I mean, maybe we'll go back in the building fund and we'll reassess. I would like to somehow honor the people that paid over $25,000 and had, certain parts of the building named after them. I'd like to still honor them in some way. But I mean, right now we really need that money, mm-hmm. and we really need to use it to fix the situation that we're in.
We are.
And I think that's more important than having a building that nobody uses.
We
At least for the interim.
I think about ready to wrap, unless Kyle had anything else. But
I'm going to make one more plea for money to the people.
Okay. I thought you were going to plea to Stephen to switch the interface again. I was about to throttle you through the screen. Okay.
So we've got about 300 people watching at the moment. Like Stephen's talked about, like Man and I have talked about, like we've been talking about on the business list every week. At the end of the day, the LP is in trouble financially. The people who are still here, for the most part, I think that even on the LNC, there's some people that don't want to see the LP succeed, but that is a different issue at the moment. The majority of the LNC, I believe, very much wants us to win. I think Stephen's on that list. Otherwise, I wouldn't be trying to work with him, I promise. When the party goes bankrupt, we die. The movement scatters, and maybe the fire could be rebuilt at that point, but it's so much more work. We have ballot access across the country, not in every state. We always want 50 states, but we don't always have it. We have ballot access. We have staffing. We have people built up. We do have some name recognition. It's not a lot, but it's some. This is the time, right? LPA, Stephen, lots of people have been fighting to make sure that people like Angela McCardle don't get to continue tanking the party. We're all fighting for the same thing and building this party up. We're fighting for this business to be effective. We're fighting to win liberty. It is the time to put your money where your mouth is. We're libertarians. We donate to show our approval. We vote with our wallets. Give money to the LP. It doesn't have to be a lot. Every little bit is helpful right now. We're in a rough spot. Yeah. So reach out, do what you can. If you don't have the money to do anything right now, but you have the time, volunteer. Even if they have to send you freaking postcards for you to fill out to people and send off to donors, potential donors, to try to get people to go in, we have the ability to win this. There's a lot of black pilling going on right now where people think that it's all over. It's nonsense. Those come from the people who are statists. The statists are terrified of people like us because we're out here and we're rallying everybody. We're sitting here and we're saying, this is the future. This is the way to cut this government out of the way. And without cutting that government out of the way, we never win. There can't be a black pill. There's only a dig deep and find a way to win. And if you don't find a way to win, you're a loser. Do what you can for this movement. We've given links out all night. We put links in again. We just shared a link again on screen. Go put that money into the LP. Make sure we survive. Make sure this movement survives so that we all have the ability to continue to fight. And if you want to see a change and you want to see us win, be part of it. You don't get to complain if you don't get to put up. Put up or shut up. Into the speech here.
All right. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining us. Thanks, Kyle. And thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on and for reaching out. It was great to have you. And I know thanks for volunteering 3 hours of a Saturday night.
Of course,
we just kept on going. Yeah, had a lot of fun. And thank you all again. I think we're going to be back at least on Thursday with the business list. So again, yes, listen to Kyle do that donation. And we will see you again. Thanks, guys.